Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I hope I'm going live about now. Let me briefly adjust my camera so you can see my beautiful silver play button in the background. Because, yes, I was too stupid to attach it to my wall. I forgot that my drill didn't work, and yeah, so it's gonna stay next to me for a little while, probably until sometime next week, but when I return from my trip. Now, this is a very much emergency stream because I didn't expect that to happen still today, which, yes, for me it's still today. It's 11:45 p.m. when I start streaming. Ladies and gentlemen, we have actually gotten iPad Pro reviews, M4 iPad Pro reviews, from multiple outlets, but especially from YouTubers. Now, we are still missing some of the biggest guys like MKBHD. Who knows, maybe he will post one right while I'm doing this video, and I just wanted to react to that. I wasn't very happy with the OpenAI video today, not because I was very unhappy with myself, but just because I thought, OpenAI, it's not really something my community enjoys that much. Now again, I have no idea who of you will be able to watch me at this crazy time during the week, the work week. It's not even the weekend or anything, but yeah, I apologize for the surprise, but I do appreciate anyone who could join. Riveting Tail Chap already saying that he is happy to see me doing live reactions. I hope you share the sentiment, and we have already prepared a couple of things. I pre-downloaded 2 reviews, which is from Dave2D and Brian Tong. Before we actually start though, let me just check very quickly. Yeah, MKBHD has not yet reviewed the device, and as far as I know, Mr. Who's the Boss also hasn't done it. Why? Like, this is what I hate about YouTube. Why? Let me just type in Mr. Who's the Boss. Like, why do I need to see specifically his shorts, and not like his pants, but like his shorts as the first recommendation? Like, this is so weird. Like, or even just like, instead of the entire search thing on top, you could show me the actual channel, right? Like, basically like a smarter search, which, I mean, this is powered by Google Tech. You sort of would assume they would be capable of doing that. Regardless, so we have not gotten like the biggest 2 tech YouTubers in the world to do a review yet. I assume Linus hasn't gotten actually a review unit, which, yes, that's funny. Oh wow, Linus is now really far behind Mr. Who's the Boss and MKBHD. They're both at well beyond 18 million. Damn, that like expose from Gamers Nexus really hurt them. So basically, we are here, we are ready. I'm extremely tired, and I hope to be wrapping this up in about an hour and a half. Anyone who can join is absolutely appreciated. As always, let me know in the comments whether you agree with me, whether you disagree with me, whether you would like to see me comment on something specific. Maybe you have some questions. And of course, if you want to support this channel directly, you can leave a super chat. Very much appreciated when I'm taking time to stream at midnight, basically, or a super sticker. That's basically the same thing. I'm reading most messages anyway. Or you can subscribe to my Patreon, which now also includes a free tier. But that's just a preamble here. We are getting into the weeds. I think I would like to start with Dave2D's review because, for one, it is a little shorter, but also he has some more technical data, a little bit more benchmark stuff. I tried to preview them, but obviously they came out less than an hour ago. So I will be speeding them up just a little bit at 1.25. If that doesn't work for you, or if there are other issues with audio and video stuff, please let me know. I'm always careful that my live streams actually work for the people watching.
This is the new 13-inch iPad Pro, and this is the new 11-inch iPad Pro, both of them new for This is the new 13-inch iPad Pro, and this is the new 11-inch iPad Pro, both of them new for 2024, and they're both running Apple's new M4 chip. But this product here is my trusty 2018 iPad Pro. This thing is almost 6 years old at this point, but I've never really been tempted to upgrade this product. I feel like this has been all the iPad that I could possibly want. But when I went to New York and checked out these devices, I was like, they were so tempting.
So for one, I do really, by the way, appreciate that like completely cold open. In the fact that like there's not too much built up. He's just saying like he isn't wasting your time. Like I spent like 7 minutes basically talking you up. He's in 7 seconds. He's already at the core of the issue. He's making some like comparisons with his original 2018 iPad Pro. This is the A12X version. This is the version where we first got that like squared off redesign. This is the version where we got the Apple Pencil 2. This is the version where we got a ProMotion screen for the first time on any Apple gadget, not just iPads in general. So this was still before the era of Apple Silicon, and technically even like before the Magic Keyboard, because the Magic Keyboard, even for this device, came out quite a little bit later, about 2 years later, and then iPadOS got the functionality to actually support stuff like that. So while yes, the 2018 iPad Pro is actually old by several standards, it is still a very well supported product. The thing that's most holding it back, even like just not the A12X chip versus M series processor, I would say it's the 4 gigs of memory. Was also Apple's explanation why it didn't get Stage Manager when iPad Pros with the M1 started getting it. So it's still definitely a good device. For most iPad stuff, I would say it's very, very good, very, very sufficient at the very least for the vast majority of people. So he comes from a very fair place. This is why, for example, I have criticized Drew from Tailosive Tech for completely getting rid of his iPad Pro after calling it like Apple's best product ever. So weird, because basically like I still believe that the form factor holds value even if you technically expected more from iPadOS at a certain point. So I would just say like he has basically the perfect product to compare it to. Like even my like M1 iPad Pro, it's significantly newer, it's significantly closer in capabilities, especially at the 13-inch size where it's like mini LED, already much better than traditional LCD. So if you come from a 2018 iPad Pro, you're basically getting a device better in every single way. Not just like technically, but like you would actually feel that every single bit is improved. So yeah, I'm actually very optimistic about the review, not in the sense that it has to be positive, but it comes from a pretty informed place.
And then after this review period, I absolutely will be finally upgrading this 2018 device. It's going to be to this 13-inch device, but it's not for the reason that it originally thought. So first thing, a quick note on the unboxing. So typically when it comes to Apple products, there's usually some kind of sticker inside the package. It could be like a white sticker or a colored sticker depending on the product, but usually there's some kind of plastic sticker in there. But seemingly in an effort to reduce their plastic consumption, stickers in Apple products are gone. But the second thing that was interesting is that on the 13-inch iPad Pro, and only the 13-inch, not the 11-inch iPad Pro, you get a black charging cable. The brick is still white, but black charging cable. And the thought that I had was like,
wait, but on the 11-inch version you don't get a black cable if you have a black iPad ordered? I thought the cables were still color matched. The reason why the bricks are not is because, well, Apple produces only one version of them, and in several regions Apple doesn't even ship the 20-watt charger anymore with the iPad Pro. So does the 11-inch not get that? That's interesting.
like, why are they separating the 13 and 11-inch? And typically when Apple includes like a black accessory, it's like,
wait, does he maybe have a white, like a silver 11-inch, and does he not know that silver does not get black cables? This is not the situation with like, well, even Macs are now color matched. This is not like Thunderbolt black. This is just black because the iPad is space black.
the Pro product. It's the thing that makes it like the most Pro. And you'll see, in terms of performance, the 13-inch is actually a more Pro device than the 11. So I just found it strange that they included a black charging cable only on the 13. This is crazy. I'm talking about colors of charging cables, but That's just how Apple does things. All right, let's talk about these displays because these new OLED panels...
Yeah, his 11-inch version. Okay, so Dave, small correction. I'll just... silver iPad doesn't get black cable. It's not a question of how pro the 13-inch is. So let's continue with actually relevant stuff.
About these new iPads. They both have these new super bright OLED panels, and the tech required to get on this bright is incredible. So it's a pair of OLED panels run in tandem, and they have these incredibly energy efficient display engines to be able to pull it off. But despite these very bright screens, they still have very good battery life. And even when I crank the OLED panels to full brightness, it still has excellent
actually really great. He has like comprehensive data. My God, like much respect for that. So the battery life is basically identical, I would say. Now it's very good that he has like, he doesn't say which mini LED. Oh, it's M1. I'm sorry. Oh, so he has the 2018 11-inch iPad Pro. He has the M4 in both sizes. And then for what he has in the 13-inch department beyond the new one is exactly what I have. And that one actually, according to his tests, is like apparently the best one when it comes to Netflix 250 nits screen. But we're talking about like a 20-minute difference, not really that relevant. At max brightness, you are at 6 hours. Wow, that's impressive. My God. Guys, you have to understand why this is so impressive, because this is 1000 nits for those two devices. This is 600 nits. Wow, Jesus Christ. Damn, that OLED is really impressive. And then for Genshin Impact, you have both those new devices being just a tiny bit better, but you also have like the 11-inch iPad Pro outperforming the 13-inch version from the two new ones. But just by a hair. Like here it's like 18 minutes, it's 18 minutes, and it's 13 minutes. So yeah, wow, like battery life in line with previous iPad Pro models. So Apple did not meaningfully sacrifice iPad Pro battery life. Now there is actually like a lot of misconceptions about this iPad Pro here. And part of it goes just to the fact that people have a very intuitive understanding of technology, not quite understanding that intuition isn't always everything. Instead, if you actually go to Apple's website, as I would expect from certain YouTubers who still believe certain things just because they feel right, but the 11-inch iPad Pro has a 31.29 watt-hour battery. That is actually 9% larger than before on the M2 11-inch iPad Pro. I have those numbers in my head, so I'm not going to bring them up. And then the 13-inch iPad Pro actually does have a battery reduction, but it's not like a 30-40% reduction like it might have been actually back in the day when Apple switched to like the iPad Air design that was like so much thinner. This is a 4% reduction versus before. So these devices should basically perform in very ways identical, because they have like the same processor, and this has like a 30% larger screen, right? So if you account for the fact that one part of the percentage of the battery life is getting eaten up by the processor, the other by the display, obviously it doesn't need to be like 30% larger overall in battery watt hours, because the display doesn't eat up 100% of your battery. So you probably end up somewhere around the same battery life, maybe a little worse for the 13-inch, less so because of the screen, but I would believe because it probably sustains performance on the M4, just also a tiny bit better around higher clock speeds and stuff like that. So nothing really to worry about. If you were happy with the M1 or M2 iPad Pro battery life, you should be getting very, very similar numbers. Thank you, actually, Dave2D, for testing this out. Actually, also great to see that even like games at max brightness. Again, this is max brightness. At max brightness, Genshin outperforms the previous generations, and this is close to double the brightness. And when you know how power consumption works, if that was the same kind of display technology, oh, believe me, that wouldn't work that way.
Amazing displays. I actually think these are the first devices out there of like consumer tech that uses this type of screen tech. It's really visible in bright and
I've heard that there's like a latest Huawei phone that has like a tandem OLED screen. I'm not sure about that. I should do some research, but yeah, this is basically the most relevant gadget out there that has it. It also seems like this is an exceedingly premium solution, right? Where this is not just like, oh, it's two OLED screens together, but it actually seems like, oh, Apple has a specific display driver created for it. Oh, it's actually really large. It's not even like a phone, where on phones even like a single layer OLED actually performs pretty well. So yeah, this seems like a solution where actually a problem previously existed. By the way, guys, we have a couple of people watching. I just want to recommend, please leave a like. It helps out the streams tremendously. If you're enjoying this, please subscribe, please share the video so others can find it and join our community, and of course please comment so that I can know what you think, so that you can let me know what you think, can leave constructive criticism, ask for certain topics, make suggestions, etc. And if you want to support this channel directly, you can leave a super chat or a super sticker right while I'm live, or if you want to support this channel in the long term, you can subscribe to my Patreon. Link is in the description.
environments. Like if you're using it right beside a super bright window or outdoors on a sunny day, these new OLED screens are way better than the stuff we've seen before. But if I'm being honest with
so 600 nits, yeah.
myself, aside from the bright, these new OLED screens are way better than the stuff we've seen before.
Yeah, it's way brighter, but it's still like if you really have like critical workflows that depend on like outdoor usage, I would then ask you to consider like that nano edged coating on the screen. It's not something I personally would want, it's not something I need, but yeah, if you actually are somebody who wants to use your iPad in that kind of way all the time, this will also save with battery life, because you can turn the brightness quite a little bit lower and still get quality output. So yeah, it depends on your usage.
But if I'm being honest with myself, aside from the brightness of these screens outdoors, I don't actually think that these new panels are that much better than even my 2018 iPad Pro. Like if you compare these products in terms of their generation side by side, yes, it is noticeable, but you gotta have them side by side. If I'm looking at them individually, I feel like they've been amazing displays since 2018. Like the 2018 or newer 11-inch iPad Pros, they're just regular IPS panels, but they're so high quality that even 6 years later, they still look good. And then the 12.9-inch iPad Pros with the mini LED panels, those have a little bloom sometimes, but they look awesome. And when I'm indoors, yes, these new OLED panels look amazing, but so does basically any iPad Pro since 2018.
Yeah, and this is partially why I am personally not upgrading my mini LED 13-inch M1 iPad Pro, simply because with the way I use it, I would find it kind of wasteful to upgrade while my screen is still that good, while my battery life still gets me throughout the entire day, while the M1 is still more than sufficient for all the little tasks that I do there, like creating my thumbnails, reading, surfing the web, checking my email, managing my YouTube studio, stuff like that. So, and for everything else, I have my even more powerful MacBook, and at that point I would also be looking into eventually upgrading it and waiting until it has like stuff like tandem OLED. So yeah, for now, not upgrading my iPad Pro.
I think many people would draw. There is one exception. It's that if you really need color accurate screens, like the best color accuracy is going to come from the newest tech. So if you work with photo and video, you really need that perfect color accuracy, these are going to do a better job. Also, there's another thing. It's the ghosting that has appeared in the previous generations of iPad Pros. So yes, 2018 and onwards, they've all had 120 hertz ProMotion, but the response time on these older panels have been a little on the slow side. So if you played like fast-paced games at high refresh, the response time was slow enough that you see some ghosting. It doesn't have that issue on these new screens because OLED.
So what he's basically doing, he is applying a little bit of like the gamer mindset here, which I really, really appreciate because it's a noticeably different perspective. Now, he's saying this is the gray to gray response time. Usually we would be talking like sub 1 millisecond on OLED. For a lot of pixel response time metrics, I assume that's just how he measures it. Doesn't really matter. Basically, at that kind of response time, it just feels fluid. Yes, it would be even better at 240 or 360 Hz, but at that point, it's ultimately meaningless for the vast majority of people, unless you happen to be like an esports player who really needs and then at that point you also aren't really looking into the iPad Pro for those kinds of uses. So maybe eventually on a Mac, Apple will consider giving us even like 240 hertz, but on the iPad, where Apple has like this very careful like 2-hour battery life target, I just don't see that happening. Fortunately and unfortunately, at least not for the next foreseeable years. Maybe once we have like a much more efficient processor as well, and then Apple can pair it with a newer display driver, maybe they can use like even more like energy efficient substrates for the OLED panels, similar to what they will be using like on the iPhone 16 Pros, but then turn that into tandem OLED. I believe at that point it makes sense for Apple to go 180 hertz to 240 hertz or something like that. But for now, I just don't think that is going to be any priority of theirs. And of course, if you're somebody who was really always bothered by the blooming on the mini LED panels, which currently on iPads were only part of the M1 and the M2 13-inch iPad Pro models, this obviously solves it because OLED has pixel to pixel perfect blacks, and so there is basically no display zones. It's just pixel by pixel control, and that makes it very color accurate. It reduces issues like blooming, and thanks to it being tandem OLED, it obviously gets brighter than traditional OLED while still retaining all the good stuff, perfect blacks, fast response times, etc. So it's a very advanced display.
Is very fast response time. Okay, the other thing that's changed, the other major change, is the dimensions and weight. So both the 13-inch and the 11-inch are thinner and lighter than the previous generation.
Yeah, so I want to bring that up. Like, look at where the 11-inch iPad Pro was before, right? It was at 5.9 millimeters. It's not like this is like this huge, unquestionable, like this is a 10% reduction in thickness, which is pretty standard when you go from IPS to OLED. And then Apple even changed the internal structure a little bit, improved cooling, increased battery capacity, and did all of that while bringing weight down by around 30 grams. Now, this iPad was already effortlessly handleable, pretty easy to hold for a long period of time. I promise you this was not. This is my M1 iPad Pro. And no, I don't really hold it like that a lot of the time. 6.4 millimeters is not a problem in of itself, but if you ever ask yourself why was it thicker than the 11-inch iPad Pro, well, that was because the 11-inch iPad Pro, doesn't matter if we talk 2018 or 2020 or 2022 or whatever, those devices were always standard IPS, while this was mini LED being apparently thicker because it also needs a little bit better cooling the way it's integrated. So this is why weight and thickness were a little disproportionate, and now Apple basically aligns those devices. I wish maybe they kept both of them the same thickness at 5.3 millimeters. It would have still been enough to call it the thinnest Apple product, would still have been thinner than the iPod Nano at 5.4 millimeters, but functionally it doesn't really matter, right? basically the reduction here in thickness mainly comes from the OLED screen and a tiny bit from a 4% smaller battery. So, but you save a full 100 grams. That's equivalent to going from, obviously it's not just equivalent, that's basically how you calculate it. It's 1.5 pounds to 1.28 pounds. So it's actually a very, very noticeable difference. Why I know this is because that is actually almost the exact same reduction in weight that the iPad 1 to the iPad 2 experienced. That was 1.5 pounds to around 1.33 pounds. This is actually being a little less than that, but there's also the question, I believe the 5G version is just a tiny bit heavier. So my recommendation here is absolutely don't look that much at the thickness, but think about the weight. Now for the 11-inch iPad, the weight probably was always okay anyway, but even lighter is still good. 23 grams, by the way. I think I said 30 grams. I saw like a 7 here. And this, a full 100 grams, that will definitely be something you feel. That will definitely be something you appreciate. And once you combine like the iPad Pro and the Magic Keyboard together, then it becomes even more impactful.
Of these products, and it's pretty significant on the 13-inch device. This is 5.1 millimeters thin. It's really thin and quite a bit lighter than the previous generation. I'm someone who's always appreciated the pursuit of thinness and the reduction of weight, and the way that Apple did it here is like even more commendable because they did not reduce the performance and they did not reduce the battery life on these products even when they shrank them down like this, so that's really cool. I will say that there's something about me that just doesn't trust a 5.1 millimeter thick device.
Lewis, you're saying you can't wait to see Jerry Rigg's Everything's review of it. Well, Lewis, for one, welcome to the stream, but like, let's also be honest, right? Jerry Rig Everything doesn't really review products. He breaks them, and he creates destruction porn videos in ways, and ever so slightly in between, like, cool ways to differently destroy a product, he gives you like, oh, it's so structurally resilient, oh, it's so fire resilient, and this and that, right? At no point does Jerry Rig Everything do even the same thing as everything Apple Pro used to do? And everything Apple Pro had like standardized heights at which he would drop the devices and stuff like that. Jerry Rig Everything does not actually contribute anything meaningful. Like when he does like his scratch tests, they're basically always identical because almost everyone uses pretty much the same glass. And if something is a little bit harder to scratch, then usually it's a little bit harder to crack, right? So even it might fare a little bit worse in Jerry's like scratch test or something like that. That doesn't actually mean it's like worse in any way, unless we're talking about like the Galaxy Fold screen, which is obviously not glass on the outermost layer, it's plastic, but even then there's like ultra thin glass even below that, so it's up to you to decide which level of glass or plastic you actually prioritize to be reviewed and tested. These devices will still bend. I will bet that they are not actually more difficult, that they are not more bendable than the previous generation. Maybe the 13-inch is because it's just so much thinner. But fundamentally, Apple's executives did talk about that there's like a little bit more metal around like the chip, which is right in the center. So there's like a graphene pad for cooling. Then there's the copper Apple logo right on top, at the outermost layer. It's so thin I cannot even like see anything. And inside the iPad, and they didn't say out of which metal it's like exactly built, but there's like an internal structure that adds some rigidity and basically stiffness to the chassis overall. But yes, this is a 5.1 millimeter product. If you try to bend it and you are an adult with like functional muscles, you will bend it. Even if you're a child, you will be able to bend it if you put your mind to it. Just my recommendation is don't put your mind to it. It's as simple as that.
They're review units, they're loaners, so I'm not going to bend them. There's no way I would do that. But I'm sure someone out there's going to do some testing where you just crank it, 5.1 millimeters is so thin. So
Yeah, and it's funny just how big the camera bump looks here. Can you imagine if those were the same cameras as like on the iPhone 15 Pro Max? Well over 1 centimeter thick, so with more than double the thickness of the iPad on that bump. So yeah, if you ever ask yourself why cannot Apple give us that much significantly better cameras on the iPad, well, that's partially the reason.
we'll see how it holds up over time. They're also both lighter, and the 13-inch one, again, is particularly impressive. But for me, I typically have my iPads like mounted on a stand or something, or just sitting on a table, so the weight reduction isn't that critical to me. But for people that carry these things around all the time, they're on a job site, they're just walking around with these things, or in a hospital, that weight reduction is a nice bonus. Okay.
Yeah, in our hospital, we often use like iPad mini, so that's not much of an issue with an iPad Pro. It has to like fit in the scrubs, so that's a little bit different, but it's also like a big question of like if in your personal life, like I walk around with my iPad a lot, similar to how Mr. Who's the Boss talked about like walking around with his MacBook Pro, almost like taking it for a walk like a dog. And I just appreciate everything that would bring thickness and heaviness down. And in that regard, I also really appreciate the existence of like the Combo Touch accessories. I think those are a pretty cool, cheaper alternative to the Magic Keyboard. So yeah, a lot of good stuff. Lewis, I wonder if Apple will make a thin iPhone just as thin as the new iPads. I wonder if at some point, well, there are a couple of issues here. First is the camera, right? Apple does not ever want to fully compromise on camera, right? Second is Apple has, ever since the iPhone 11 days, really become known to not just be behind anymore in terms of battery life, but actually be one of the leaders. And then the 13 Pro Max was kind of the battery life king, and when you adjust for battery capacity, the 15 Pro Max is like an absolute undisputed champion, like beating or matching like the Galaxy S24 Ultra, despite that one having over 10% higher battery capacity and stuff like that. So it depends. I could see, like, we have had this like very sketchy rumor. I don't who was it? It came out recently that there would be like an iPhone Air, because we had like rumors about like Apple supposedly like reducing the battery capacity inside the iPhone 16 Plus, and then basically that would lead to like an iPhone that basically like hunts for thinness the way that the iPad does. Now, I don't know if this was like even substantial enough of a rumor to even come up here, but basically this is what you would imagine happening, right? But because of camera, because of battery life, right, like iPhone 16 Plus battery capacity, 16 release date, price, is there more here? Well, thank you, Google. There's the rumor that it would basically have a 9% reduction in battery capacity versus the iPhone 15 Plus, going basically from 4,400 to 4,000 milliampere hours. Now, part of that would be enabled by what I assume will be a significantly more efficient A18 chip versus the A16 currently. Maybe this will be part of Apple's strategy to basically start once again more of a thinness race for iPhones, though like then the camera bumps will just get incredibly wacky. Could see that happening would replace the iPhone SE. Well, yeah, especially if you think about it, right? If you look at like a 6.1 inch device, right, and it might have like relatively thickish bezels. It might not even have like the dynamic island. It might have a notch, right? And then you can basically use the fact that it just has a relatively large footprint to make it relatively thin, right? Probably would be like around 7 millimeters or something like that. When actually iPhone 5 thickness, that was 7.6 millimeters thick. That was, and I think then the iPhone 6 was even thinner. At 6.9 millimeters. I wonder if Apple could like make a 6.6 millimeter thick iPhone, so still relatively like substantial in comparison to the iPads, and then just say, well, this is our thinnest iPhone ever. I don't see Apple targeting like 5 millimeters on iPhone the way they do on iPad.
M4 chip. This is the first device, or these two devices are the first devices that have the new Apple M4 chip. Incredibly fast, but still very energy efficient. Now,
so yeah, he basically has one that goes up to around 3800. To anybody who's watched my prior videos, we've seen results on the M4 as high as 3930, but I assume that 3800 is like around a more typical result. It should be noted that those are devices that are still like in some ways setting themselves up, so there might be still some room for improvement, especially since those devices are probably very much designed in expectation with iOS 18. So let's see if that frees up any kind of extra stuff. But yeah, 3800, incredibly impressive, basically 50% faster than the M2 iPad Pro in both single-threaded and multi-threaded tasks. And then versus the M1, obviously the benefits become even larger. But yeah, at that point, you also really have to consider though, like, will you feel those differences in your everyday use cases?
Now, both of these are able to handle their heat output well, but the 13-inch one is fractionally better. That's why it has the black cable, all right? The thing is, though, aside from these synthetic benchmarks, it's actually really hard for me to tell the M1 chip device, aside from these synthetic, the black cable.
So why did he show that for such a short period of time?
Two devices are the first devices that have the new Apple M4 chip. Incredibly fast, but still very energy efficient. Now, both of these are
very energy efficient because we also have like
but
battery.
The 13-inch one is fractionally better.
So okay, 13-inch version handles thermals a tiny bit better. Makes sense. It's the same processor. I assume they have like basically the same internal cooling system, which leaves the M4 iPad Pro basically with the larger aluminum chassis to push the heat out towards it. Absolutely makes sense. It basically uses its higher thermal mass by having more aluminum. Yeah, I have not much to add to that. They seem to be performing very much in line with each other. 6, 7, 8,000. So it would go from like 9,000 peak to close to like 6,500, 7,000 on Wildlife Extreme. We'll have to compare that once we have more results. GFX Bench, 3D Mark, the ray tracing tests, all that jazz, how it compares to the M3, how it compares to the M2. So that will be interesting.
That's why it has the black cable, right? The thing is, though, aside from these synthetic benchmarks, it's actually really hard for me to tell the M1 chip devices from these new M4 chips. Like, they're so similar. And from the perspective of me, who's trying to replace a 2018 device, even then, the 2018 model I have benchmarks way worse than these M4 devices. But in terms of the stuff that I do, like streaming shows or taking notes and the occasional drawing app, it still feels really snappy, even compared to the new M4. Okay. I want to move on to the conversation of the new Apple Pencil Pro. So this is the new Apple Pencil Pro that I cannot really use properly because I'm not an artist, but my niece is, so I let her draw on it for a couple hours.
Well, but I would say the benefit of the new Apple Pencil Pro is that it gets you all the new features like barrel roll, like squeeze at the same price as Apple Pencil 2. I think the biggest complaint you can have with this iPad is actually a very Apple complaint, which beyond iPadOS, which is a little bit more of an opinion, I think the more objective complaint about the price basically comes down to, well, do you think that the more unique benefits of like this being like a tablet with probably like the world's greatest screen and whatever actually like give you enough value to justify the high pricing? And then Apple smartly did things like give you double the base storage for $200 higher prices. They also smartly segmented between like the 256 512 gigabyte version versus the 1 and 2 terabyte version in terms of how much RAM they have, in terms of in terms of how many performance cores they have. So if you're basically not a super pro user, get a 256 or 512 gigabyte version just to save a noticeable amount of money. Lewis, you're saying, has there been a reduction in price for the normal Apple Pencil? No, there's no normal Apple Pencil. You have to understand, the Apple Pencil 2 is not in the lineup anymore, in the sense that it's there as like a cheap alternative. That's up to the USB-C Apple Pencil, or as I call it, the dumb Apple Pencil. In that sense, the Apple Pencil 2 just exists to stay compatible with previous iPads, and Apple does not like to reduce prices on those kinds of gadgets because they see as it's like almost like devaluing it. If you actually want to get an Apple Pencil 2, which is still a great accessory for your older iPad, I highly recommend getting it through Amazon or whatever, because they are usually always at least 10% on discount there. Apple does not like to do that. I personally would like for them to maybe go down from $129 to like $114.99 or something like that, but Apple, that's just not Apple's MO.
These are some thoughts she had. The barrel roll feature, where the gyroscope inside the Apple Pencil Pro can sense the rotation degree of the barrel, it's neat, but it's seemingly very situational. Like, very few brushes and or markers can actually take advantage of it.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a brand new product with like just a few apps updated for it. It also depends on like what the actual developers think actually has any value to be integrated with like the barrel roll feature. I think over time it will become much more apparent. It's the same thing we always have when there's a new feature on a product or a new accessory. I personally wouldn't worry that like barrel roll is not like consistently integrated in every single brush, in every single drawing app.
Not necessary for most digital illustration, but the squeeze gesture, she really liked that. So in the beginning, she found it a little bit cumbersome because it would trigger a few times by accident, but once she got used to it, you could tell that she was able to switch colors and access different tools a lot quicker than using the traditional UI, and she liked that. And then the last thing is the haptic motor that's inside the Apple Pencil Pro. So when you squeeze the barrel and you do that squeeze gesture, you get this little haptic bump that just tells you that you squeeze it. It's just to make the whole process of squeezing the barrel and then like selecting things feel a little bit more deliberate. It's like a very subtle thing. It's nothing crazy, but again, it's just a nice little feature add on this device. Now, the issue that I have with this whole product, the whole Apple Pencil Pro, is that this is only available on the new iPad Pros. You cannot use this new Apple Pencil Pro with the old generations of iPad Pros, even the one that came out 2 years ago. And to me, like, okay, the reasoning behind it is that because the front-facing camera is now mounted on the landscape edges, right on the sides of these iPads, and it's a great position, right? You just get better FaceTime angles on the side there, and Face Unlock is a little bit better on that side, but it just kills me. They're claiming that because the camera's positioned there, the magnetic and charging system had to be tweaked, and therefore these new ones can't work. Like, it just feels a little too convenient that now, if you want this new Apple Pencil Pro with all its new features, you have to buy a whole new iPad to be able to get it. And I mean,
well, yeah, I mean, this is kind of like there are always new starts for Apple. Now, I question the new Magic Keyboard. I do believe that the main reason why it's not compatible with older iPads, or why the new iPads are not compatible with older Magic Keyboards, is mainly the question of the thickness. And the question is basically like, would it fit perfectly? I don't know how much they changed with like the magnetic connector. Seems to be in about the same spot and whatever. There are some small changes with how much wattage it can actually use through those pins, but it's not like you could still use like an old iPad with that new Magic Keyboard if everything else was compatible, and just reduce the wattage through the extra USB-C port from like 60 watts, which these iPads are capable of, to 30 watts. I don't think that is as big of a problem here. In my opinion, the compatibility with the Magic Keyboard is actually the more questionable part, and it's mainly like more of like a perfectionist approach towards like, well, I believe this accessory should only work with the iPad that is just the perfect thickness for when it fits basically like a sandwich in between the Magic Keyboard layers, while with the Apple Pencil, I actually disagree. I think the justification is very, very reasonable. They repositioned the camera and Face ID the way people ask them to, and now people have to deal with the consequences. If you don't believe those consequences, then look at the 10th generation iPad, which had a repositioned camera, and that created issues in the sense that it actually ended up only having a magnetic connection, not a charging mechanism. And I believe you, and I promise you, Apple did not want to compromise it in that way. It ended up with them having to create this weird workaround with like making the Apple Pencil 1 connect through like a weird cable and an accessory, and then they ended up creating the dumb Apple Pencil, as I call it, the one that has actually a USB-C port inside. So yeah, that created a ton of issues that they ended up solving with this iPad and the iPad Air. So if you're somebody who just wants to tell me that, oh, the iPad 2, the Apple Pencil 2 would work, maybe if you account for the fact that, yeah, they could have like put maybe the camera slightly to the right and then the Face ID modules slightly to the left of the charging thing, yes, but it's up to Apple to decide where they do that or where they still try to at least somewhat center the camera. It's by no means perfectly centered, but it is definitely closer to where it would be if Apple tried to make this still compatible with Apple Pencil 2.
Be true, it's probably true, but it just still kills me that that's the state of how you get the new Apple Pencil Pro to work. I also want to talk about these new keyboards. So this here is the new Magic Keyboard for the new iPad Pros. And again, you can only get this new keyboard with the new iPad Pros. And the whole keyboard feels very good. Like this is a very similar keyboard to, in terms of like the feel and even the aesthetics, to the keyboards that are on the existing MacBook lineup. And it's got this metal keyboard deck and a trackpad that is also like a haptic trackpad. This is not a trackpad that you depress and like it physically moves up and down. There's a bit of movement, but
yeah, it looks incredibly premium, by the way. I also, looking at this, I kind of prefer this over the look of my MacBook Pro, where like the keyboard portion is just completely black. I just like the contrast. And yeah, this is a much larger trackpad. They do have a function row. Those are pretty thin keys in that regard in comparison to MacBooks, but I mean, those are function keys. You don't need them to be like regular sized, really. And then you have like the T, up, down, left, right buttons. And yeah, it's like 1 millimeter travel, which is about standard with what Apple likes to deliver these days. Looks actually like a decent amount of travel, and if the keys just feel the same as on the previous Magic Keyboard, and now with a more heftier, even though it's technically lighter, aluminum bottom, then yeah, they definitely have a winner on their hand, especially at the same price.
The tap that you feel, the kind of click that you feel, is from a motor on the inside that generates that kind of tactile feedback, just like their MacBooks. But typing on this keyboard is awesome. I type as fast on this thing as I would on basically any laptop keyboard. It just feels like a better typing experience than the one you got from the previous generation of Magic Keyboard. Like the keys on this just feel...
Yeah, I mean, just look, much larger trackpad. You have the function row. I mean, it is slightly questionable, like that you can, like, the angles on the Magic Keyboard are good, but they definitely are not quite as versatile as like what you can do with a MacBook hinge. But this is not quite the goal here. Basically, the goal is just to make it sturdy, just to make the hinge, even though it's very thin, still keep the iPad up on your lap very nicely. So yeah, I do believe that this is a very, very well engineered accessory. The fact that the pricing didn't increase despite like now several years of strong inflation, despite the extra functionality of a much larger haptic touch trackpad and the inclusion of a function row and a faster charge through speed for the USB-C port. Yeah, I'm very, very happy with that. This is actually a Magic Keyboard that I would consider. In the past, it just didn't feel right to me. Louis, do you think we'll see any product refreshes to WWDC? If we get any, it might actually be something surprising in a way, like an M4 Mac Mini. I could see that happen, right? Maybe we would like... I honestly have no idea how quickly Apple plans to like roll out the M4 family of chips. They might be super duper crazy and give us M4 Pro and M4 Max devices at WWDC, but at the very least I could see like a Mac Mini happening. I would have said iPad Mini, but there seems to be basically no chance. Every rumor points to it being like a late 2024, maybe early 2025 product, unfortunately. So yeah, I kind of think WWDC might be, for the vast majority of it, a software event, basically as it's intended to be.
Responsive. And also, it's a aluminum surface, which some people might like. The older one had that like soft touch rubber, which I didn't mind, but it does feel more premium on this new product. But the pricing between the two Magic Keyboards is still the same. So this year, with the new iPad Pros, you just get a way better product all around, right? You get a better screen, better chip, better pencil, better keyboard, better front-facing camera position, and all while the device is being thinner and lighter. The price has gone up by about $100 depending on the configuration.
Yeah, it's actually $100 exactly if you account for the fact that the 256 gigabyte version is now the base storage, which I think makes now you have to account also for the fact that you technically are not getting a fully enabled chip, but now you also have to consider that you are getting an N3E processor versus an N5P chip, and while you are getting the same amount of memory, you are technically getting faster memory. I'm not sure about the storage. As far as I understand, it's still like 3.5 gigabytes per second storage, not like PCIe 4 speeds, or PCIe 4x4 speeds to be more precise. So some things have not changed that much, but given just how much better the screen is and how much better even like the accessory situation is, I think that price increase is actually really reasonable. I just believe that in the next year or two, Apple has to follow that up with like software changes that still maintain like the iPadOS unique approach, but fundamentally close the gap in functionality to macOS. By which I mean like we need like something more akin to Finder. We need more of the Pro apps, even if they're still scaled down versus their Mac counterparts. I do firmly believe that we need like Xcode on the iPad Pro, and yeah, after that I think more people will calm down about like, oh, we need to have to be able to run macOS on the iPad.
But it does have a higher base configuration than before, so it is more expensive to get into this whole product line. But the fact remains, this is a just infinitely, it's a better product compared to anything I've had before. Now, when I went to New York and I got to see these things, I was like, okay, for sure, I'm gonna be upgrading. But then, having gotten the review units in, I'm starting to get some cold feet, because everything I'm comparing it to my 2018.
To everyone who is watching, who's enjoying this, please subscribe, like, share, comment, do all the YouTube jazz, as I call it. It helps the channel tremendously. If you want to leave a small super chat or a super sticker to reward me for streaming for you guys right at midnight, please feel free to do so if your finances allow it. And if you want to support this channel directly in the long term, you can find my Patreon link in the description.
It's better, but the overall experience didn't really change for me, especially for the stuff that I do. But then, yesterday, just as I was like gathering my thoughts around this stuff, I had this crazy epiphany. So, the way that I shoot my videos right now, if you guys have noticed, I have multiple cameras all running at the same time, usually 2, sometimes 3 or 4, and they're all being fed to one computer that's running OBS. And I try to edit my videos in real time. Like I'll switch camera angles and try different transitions while I shoot my videos. And
yeah, that by the way is, if I ever like start producing like high quality content, edited stuff, whatever, this would be kind of my approach. Not because like I can edit. I know it's like the kind of like the curse of live streamers that we cannot edit, but the reason why I prefer to do live streams is because I actually think there's an inherent value in like first takes in a way, not in the sense that like, oh, I didn't do any research and now I just opened my mouth, but I believe there is a value to me having like, oh, I tried this and I liked it. Might not be a perfect shot, right? It's not a Hollywood high production movie. It's not even like an MKBHD production, but it just feels nice. It has a certain rhythm to it. For me, currently, I try to achieve that with my live streams. Part of that is also because I only reasonably have my 15 Pro Max. I do not have like a DSLR camera for like different angles and zooms or whatever. So I actually really appreciate seeing his approach here. And yeah, if I ever get more into content production, if I ever believe that YouTube should take up significantly more of my time, I would do it like this. Not quite as good as he does, obviously, especially not at start. But yeah, this would be my approach.
And I do all of this through a Stream Deck. I press buttons, I can control the cameras as I shoot. But in Apple's keynote video, they showed this multicam setup thing that was running on Final Cut for iPads. And
it also integrates with like the Final Cut camera app coming to the iPhone.
That was kind of neat. But then they showed me a demonstration of it in front of my face of like how it's all done. And I was blown away. I saw this thing being done. I was like, this is crazy. Like they were running 4 cameras, kind of similar to what I'm trying to pull off, but it was all done without any wires. It was just done with a single iPad, and it was controlling all things like the zoom, the focus. Like it was just crazy. And this setup that I have here, this took me like, I don't know, a week and a half to really kind of configure it. And even now,
yeah, I can imagine to perfectly know where everything else is, how to click every button so that it works for you. Yeah, it's really hard to like set something like this up without properly understanding what you actually want. So kudos to him. It's a very, very cool thing. I actually respect him quite a lot as a content creator.
I'm still like fiddling with it. But this has 50 wires, and there's so much stuff that I have to tweak and fix all the time. Not so much fix, but there's so much stuff that I need to fiddle with.
Yeah.
And all of this thing hinges on that computer right there, a very decked out Mac Studio. Now,
which means, of course, you don't have like direct control over it. So if you actually want to tune something for macOS, you have to look at another screen. You would have to have a mouse and keyboard close to you, which does break some of your workflow in that regard. Well, if you have a multi-touch iPad with a very large screen, vibrant screen, maybe still a screen that actually looks good even at like low brightness levels, maybe in his case it would make sense to get like the nano edged version, so it just gives as little light off as possible. Yeah, that kind of workflow would actually be phenomenal.
Or I had that Mac. I used to run it on a regular Windows PC. I had an RTX 4090 in a 13th gen Intel system. I also tried an AMD system. Those PCs were way too loud for what I'm doing because we have 4K cameras that are being fed into a thing that's encoded.
Yeah, it just automatically means like you have very decent encoders on NVIDIA GPUs, but like he says he had like a 13 gen Intel system, which I assume would probably be like 3700 to 3900K. Otherwise, it just doesn't make sense. He probably needs all those processor cores to work with. Yeah, that gets hot. That means the fans run up. The Mac Studio still doesn't run fully fanless, but it doesn't have to be. You can run pretty simple software if you have like a very consistent fan noise from one source. It's not too difficult to isolate it, but yes, if you can run it all on a passively cooled iPad, one that actually gives you like direct input, that's completely unbeatable.
And sometimes I would stream this stuff out, so all of that processing, it can handle it on a regular Windows system, but the fan noise was really annoying to work around it. So I tried running the system in a separate room, but it's just like I wanted access to the computer. Like it was a pain. So I got this M2 Mac Studio in, but it's a borrowed unit. This is not.
Oh, M2 Max, not even M2 Ultra. I wonder like just how much power an M4 Ultra chip will have. This is why Lewis, you asked like what would I expect at like WWDC in terms of product refreshes. I don't know if I would expect it, but I think it would be kind of bonkers to get M4 Max, M4 Ultra based Macs. Like could you imagine getting like a Mac Studio jumping from the M2 Max and M2 Ultra to M4 Max, M4 Ultra, getting like maybe a new Mac Pro. Oh, Jesus.
Not mine. It has to go back. And I was like, okay, if I have to do this whole setup using a stupidly expensive Mac computer.
It depends. Like, I don't think Mac Studio is stupidly expensive. I think, yeah, once you go up a lot with its storage and memory, but then you also have to consider, especially for the memory, that it does things with the memory that like Windows system wouldn't be able to. Like, you can give your 14900K 128 gigabytes of memory. I think it go to 256, right? With DDR5, but then your 4090 is limited to 24 gigs of memory. Your 5090 will probably be limited to 32 gigs of memory, and even if you get like the more professional version of those, you would be like at 48 or 64 gigabytes, and now you're paying way more than any Mac Studio. So yeah, I don't think it's as stupid. Louis, I'm still on Windows, but thinking of maybe getting a MacBook, but just order the M4 iPad. My god, man, congrats. That's a really like really awesome purchase. Congratulations. You also now became my #1 target in asking for super chats and super stickers and Patreon subscriptions, because I know you have the money for an M4 iPad Pro. Just joking. I'll just take the views, but yeah, I really let me know in future streams, like once you actually get it, let me know what it feels. Maybe over time I plan on opening up like a Discord, so this can work a little bit like a radio show. So if you want to ever like tune in and then we talk and you let me know how the M4 works for you. Maybe before that I go like to the Apple store and see how it holds, how it feels in the hand, how the screen looks in very short interactions. Yeah, so that would be very interesting and also very rewarding for me.
Or I could use this iPad and do the same kind of thing with no wires. I'm like, I want to try that. I need to try that thing. Now,
the question is, I don't know what the iPad is capable of doing in that regard when it comes to like non-iPhone stuff, right? I know it works with like the Final Cut Pro, Final Cut camera app, but would it work with like a Sony Alpha camera? Like, can you output that? Would you need to connect it with like an accessory or cable? Not to be confused, you got it on finance. Yeah, man. Excuses. I can sniff the excuses still here. Karl Babinski, welcome to the stream. You're saying your 11-inch 1TB iPad Pro is coming on Wednesday. Dude, another show off, but also another candidate to send super chats and super stickers. Man, I got you now. Bitches.
That app is not available for
I always try to be family friendly, even though ultimately in basically every stream I use a couple of curse words.
So I'm like, the idea was that I would be able to play with it and talk to you guys about it, but I'm pretty sure that that's the setup I want to switch to. It just seems so fluid and effortless and just easy to use. And because I try to do my stuff live and interact with it live, I mean, like that's the dream of how I want to make content. So I'm totally picking up one of these 13-inch devices. Again, these are loaners. They have to go back, but I'm going to buy one. And hopefully I can do what they showed in the marketing material. Now, you might be looking at this and be like, dude, that's marketing material. That's not going to work.
I mean, marketing material doesn't mean that it's a lie. Like, it has to be based on at least something. So I wouldn't just say that, like, they're, like, completely lying to you because they've maybe chosen, like, the best case scenario. But also, he still, like, edits his videos. So it's not like he would be doing, like, what as a moron am doing, like, doing just a live stream and hoping for the best while I'm live. He would still have the capability to give a little bit more refinement to the final product.
Maybe it won't, but I think when I see that, I see what that thing could do. And the same thing goes with like the Logic Pro and like the whole ecosystem that is available on the high-level iPads right now is incredible. Like, it's actually kind of strange. I mean, it's changed the perspective of how I view these products. Like, the very first time I reviewed one of the kind of more expensive iPad Pros, and it's still the same sentiment that's today. The whole idea is that cool hardware, but there's nothing to do on these crazy tablets, these crazy powerful tablets. But I think it's changing. Like, you just have to be open to the idea of what these things can do. I really think that new Final Cut workflow with the multiple cameras being run simultaneously, where you can control focus and zoom off of a single iPad with all these cameras feeding into it, that is crazy cool to me. Okay, but that's
yeah, so that was an awesome review, relatively short, relatively compact, covered all the most important things. I will I will look at what other reviews are out there. If like MKBHD hasn't posted his review, I will watch Brian Tong's review, or if Mr. Rooster Boss hasn't posted one, and we will watch that one a little quicker, even though it's a pretty long one, because obviously we have covered quite a lot of topics, and I would just love to see whether there's agreement, disagreement. I respect both of those guys, so, and I think there's still enough enjoyment because Brian Tong also produces very high quality videos. So yeah, but as always, those of you who are watching, let me know. For one, is the audio and video stream working well for you? Is there something you have questions about? Is there something you want to comment on specifically, while I basically do a tiny bit of last minute research? So MKBHD has not posted one, but he this was actually funny. On the day when like it was introduced, like there was like Google Pixel 8a stuff. It's like, dude, like Google, find the right moment to show off your pixels. And Mr. Rooster Boss, I assume he would also be taking maybe a couple of days longer. Yeah, and we have reacted to that video. It was a really good video where he basically makes the case for why, including with the improvements that he now saw on iPadOS versus his prior experience, that this basically convinced them to get it. I still think that the people getting like more expensive, newer iPads, and they're coming primarily from Macs, they might be disappointed in certain ways, but I do hope that the positives ultimately heavily outweigh the negatives for them, and that more and more people will be encouraged to get those devices. So let's get to Brian Tong. It's a little loud.
What's up, Brian Tong here, and this is my review for Apple's new M4 iPad Pro. You got it right here, and if you can't see it right now, that's because it's the thinnest product Apple has ever made, thinner than the iPod.
So Brian is obviously a little more excited, like in the Apple-ish way,
iPad Pro
about
13-inch model for the purpose of
weight
this review,
reduction.
It's going to be going right back to them.
Lewis, you're saying you just subbed to my Patreon. Man, that's awesome. To the free version, right?
10-core CPU, 10-core GPU, and then the 16-core neural engine and 16 gigs of unified memory. So this is a freaking beast. And if there was ever, an iPad that is OP, and hey, mama, that means overpowered, this is it. And we're going to talk about all that power. But the first thing that you see is its incredible design.
Is that like one of those health rings, right? It feels a little thick to be like a wedding band. Am I just stupid? Am I missing something here?
13-inch iPad Pro is 5.1 millimeters
I don't want
thin,
to
right?
down talk, obviously, if it's his wedding ring, but
Thunderbolt port that is right here on the bottom. I mean, if you can see it, it's just barely thicker than that. And to me,
my
it's a
man,
true marvel of engineering and design.
I just checked it out. You sub to the MarkTech Pro Max, our first Pro Max subscriber on my Patreon. If you guys don't know, we have multiple tiers, and Lewis just went and did it and subscribed to the most important version. Well, I guess you got the iPad Pro and finance, man, and now you got me. Tell me what's the better deal now.
With how thin and how powerful
it is.
Thank
you.
I mean,
it's incredibly appreciated.
iPad, I'm just going to let you know, this is different. I already know the comments are coming, and people are saying, I can't wait to see it bend. And I've always said, hey, if you want to bend something, it will bend. But
yes. So basically, like, he is even more doubling down on that it's impressively thin, that the weight reduction is pretty impressive, and he's smartly saying something that I have said something for years. If you want to bend something, you will be able to, right? Basically, I have had like this iPad Pro, I have known people who have had other iPad Pros, or like even like the newer iPad Airs, and nobody ever bent their products. If there ever was a bend, it wasn't even like a bending issue. Like they hit it like against the wall or something, and then it bent slightly around it, but then you can also almost like bend it back if you feel like it. Yeah, I don't know. It is what it is. I just wouldn't focus too much on it. I've also said it in my previous stream. I can just recommend you guys put on like a Pitaka case on it if you still want to make it as thin and as light as possible, while also giving it more structural rigidity. That would be my approach.
How many of you have actually bent your iPad in half by accident? Yeah, not many of you. Now, Apple says, even with this new thin design, it is just as rigid and as strong as the previous M2 iPad Pro. So
it's also funny, like how you can really, like, until this day, Apple still has held true to the idea that the iPad is basically like an orientation agnostic product, right? This is, for example, why when people say, well, why is it okay for a MacBook or an iPhone to have a notch, but not for the Galaxy Tab S Ultra? Well, partially because the Galaxy Tab S Ultra is actually it should be the most orientation agnostic product out of any Samsung devices, but it's now the least one, while obviously a MacBook is always in one orientation, and the iPhone is either in portrait with the camera on top, or it's on one side while you're watching movies or something. Louis, you're saying that's why you have a Samsung since the iPhone 6s. I have never forgiven Apple for that. For the bending, dude, put the case on it.
We'll find out eventually.
I had an iPhone 6 and a 6 Plus, and never anything happened. And I was a big kid carrying it around in my back jeans pocket.
I'll just wait for you to actually hold this thing.
One thing I just want to mention here, though, by the way, like that screen is so bright, it creates just like a little bit of like camera issues here, and it feels almost like printed on. Like, this is one thing. Like, I've always said that for certain movie stuff, I actually prefer the color, like, it's not even color science, but a little bit of the color feel on like LCD and mini LED. But when it comes to just the power of colors, OLED is still king. And I just hope that micro LED at some point will be able to merge all those benefits of OLED, get fully rid of burn-in risk, and give me a little bit more of that feel that I associate with LCD. I don't know why. I just, for like when I watch anime, I really somehow dislike watching anime on my LG C1? C2? I always forget which one I had. Yeah, and whenever I watch it on like my mini LED iPad Pro, and yes, some of that might be down to like color precision and stuff like that, and color tuning, but I just genuinely, even when I look at stuff like that on my OLED iPhone, I still prefer like my mini LED iPad and MacBook Pro to it. Louis, you're saying you're accident prone. Again, dude, wear a case. I'm not accident prone, and I still always put a case on, and I have a protective glass cover, because even if I'm not accident prone, I might put it on the table, somebody might ram the table, I might put it somewhere, and my mom's cat might jump on it or whatever. She was previously my cat, so I know she will do that. So yeah, I know people can be accident prone, but that's not a reason to not enjoy life and be in the Samsung camp, Louis. By the way, when I wink towards you there, that's because I have my comments here. I should still be winking there, I just realized. Louis, you're saying OLED is great, but the burn-in is a killer. Well, tandem OLED will be the most durable OLED in that regard that we have ever seen. My last phone got burned within a year. Well, I've had my iPhone XS Max for 3 years. It then went to my mom's for over 2 years, and now my grandma has it. And do you know how much burn-in that device has? 0.
Feel how thin, light, and solid it is. And for everyone saying, we never asked for a thinner iPad, it's going to impress you. Now, the other thing that is going to impress you is this display. It pops. It looks so good. I don't know if it can pop from here, but Apple calls it its tandem OLED display. It is 2 OLED panels stacked on top of each other. So the light path of the second OLED panel underneath, that goes through the first one, since the first OLED is transparent to light that's generated by the second OLED. And that's what allows this OLED display to be bright enough to meet Apple's XDR display standard. So its results are 1000 nits of full screen brightness for both standard and HDR content, and then 1600 nits peak HDR brightness.
This is where I do like really appreciate the work that like Dave2D does, where he does provide like more detailed breakdowns. I do look forward to seeing like this screen fully analyzed in like how much can you do at full speed, full screen brightness, how much can you do at like 10% brightness and stuff like that. I do tend to trust Apple for their 1000 and 1600 nits rating. Sometimes their screens actually overperform expectations a tiny bit, so let's see how that performs.
To give you that specular details that you can really pop on screen from whether it's photos or videos. And this has ProMotion, so it supports a variable refresh rate from 10 hertz to 120 hertz. Now, the previous M2 iPad Pro actually hits these same benchmarks using mini LED display technology, but the difference is with OLED, you get those deeper...
No, it didn't. Previously, it hit 600 nits of peak SDR brightness, so the HDR brightness is unchanged because Apple has actually like created a pretty advanced like algorithms for HDR where they see like 1000 nits is like optimal for full screen brightness, 1600 nits for like specular highlights and stuff like that. I'm absolutely sure that this screen could have like a 1% or 2000 nits thing, but I just don't think that Apple really cares about that. Similar how Apple doesn't really care about like beyond retina pixel density or something like that.
Blacks with the individual pixel control that reduces the blooming or that white halo effect that you can get from mini LED displays. I've seen so many comments that are saying, what about OLED burn-in? Well, guess what? Your iPhone is an OLED screen, and specifically with tandem OLED displays, the general longevity of its dual stack OLED display is more than a decade, and by that time, you probably won't be using the iPad anymore. I mean, yeah, people use these for longer amounts of time, and even if you do, it still should be okay. One thing to mention here, though, there is...
Lifespan of 10 years. So I assume this is a spec point that he got like from Apple. This is why it's really advantageous to be listening to like different kinds of reviewers, because they will all ask Apple individual things, and Apple likes to give like small morsel of technical details to like different reviewers depending on what exactly they ask and I guess how nicely they ask. So yeah, it seems like Apple is very, very confident about it. However, you should consider that this is still Apple. They will not go out of their way to give you like a 5, 10 or 7 year like a burn-in warranty, the way that like an Asus might do for their QD OLED gaming monitors. So you would still be basically bound to Apple's 1 or 2 year warranties depending on the region you're in.
Is a nano texture option for the iPad Pro display, but that's only for the 1 terabyte and 2 terabyte iPad Pro models. Now this diffuses the light and reduces glare. It's a $100 upgrade if you want it, but for me, it really depends on how you use this device. Now the nano texture, it does a little bit of muting those deep blacks a little bit, so there is going to be a trade-off, and it can even make text kind of look softer at times. Apple says that the nano texture glass option not going all the way to the edge of the iPad Pro was both a design decision and a technical decision. I have a Pro Display XDR, you see it also on the Studio Display. That nano texture coating on those goes all the way, covering the entire
I have
bezel.
to say, I know I'm kind of alone in that camp. I do prefer having glossy bezels on like a matte screen, but that's because I just prefer everything glossy, and I just want to see a little bit of gloss even if the screen is technically like matte. So this just feels a little boring to me, while on the iPad I like the contrast between like the main screen and the bezels on the nano texture
but not on
version.
the iPad Pro. But if you're planning to use this outside in the field for shoots...
I also assume that part of it is when Apple says technical, I assume that they probably would have been fine with the camera, but they really didn't want to create like exceptions, like big portions of the nano texture stuff that suddenly feels glossy, because that's where like the Face ID stuff is. So they just went with fully glossy for the entire bezel.
Creative projects, or
it's
you're just in a really very bright work area
very,
with lots of lights and
basic
reflections, then I'd
guess
say
here.
it's probably worth the upgrade.
Louis, the problem with tandem OLED is it's brand new tech, so the tech life expectancy of getting not burnt, it would vary. I think OLED is OLED. Well, yeah, it definitely can get burnt in, but you have to understand the way this specific technology works. It depends on two things, right? For one, the underlying technology, right, which is, for example, QD OLED is supposedly better than other OLED types when it comes to burn-in mitigation. It's also brighter and stuff like that. And then tandem OLED. Now this is not QD tandem OLED, but it is Apple's OLED now twice. And since it does have higher efficiency, it means it would be like less prone to like heat issues and things like that. And because it's more efficient and you can run it at lower voltages and stuff, this will mitigate burn-in issues. Now, you would still face potential burn-in issues, especially around like static UI elements. I would also like to remind people, though, that even like that swipe up line on the bottom, it's not always the same color. It also sometimes turns gray or black, which means it's actually like not really prone to burn-in. I've seen it like on my 13 Pro Max that it has like a tiny bit of discoloration around that area, but I didn't have it on my 10s Max, so I don't know if I just got a little bit unlucky in that regard. And then the other, well, which I guess would make it the third point, is actually your own use case. So if you actually max it out very often at 1000 nits brightness with a somewhat static screen, that is one thing. Yes, then you could make even like tandem OLED burn in. But if you use it more like a traditional iPad most of the time at around 400 nits or so, you're probably much better off than you would be with like a Samsung tablet, right?
Now for me, I actually use a Pro Display XDR, a big display while I edit video with the nano texture coating, but for an iPad, I think I'm going to go with a standard display for this iPad Pro.
I agree. I honestly think that nano
texture
texture is like a little bit more pro in a way.
And of the paper-like screen protectors that you can get third-party in the past, so I might go for that this time around. Now, another benefit of this stacked tandem OLED is that the new iPad Pro is significantly thinner. I mean, you can see it right here. I'm going to hold it up to the camera, like, look at. I mean, if you look at how I don't even have sausage fingers.
I love his excitement for this stuff.
Right,
I think that stuff is still important.
12.9-inch M1 iPad Pro that has the same dimensions as the M2 iPad Pro. Just want to use them for comparison. So the earlier iPad Pros, it's 6.4 millimeters thick, and then compared to the 5.1 millimeters thick new iPad Pro, that is a significant difference. Bottom line, the hardware design here, it is stellar, and it still gets roughly 10 hours of battery life in this thinner body. And for those of you who are screaming, we never asked for a thinner iPad. I see the comments. The iPad battery life...
I've always screamed about the lighter iPad, so if part of achieving that is making it thinner, then yeah, please go all the way for that.
It's personally never been an issue for me, even on long flights, but of course, don't we always want better battery life and performance? Yes, but this is not a deal breaker for me. Now, the tech that ties all this together and makes it all work is Apple's new M4 chip. The iPad Pro skipped the M3, and this is the first Apple product to get the M4. It's based on second generation 3nm technology, which means that it's even more power efficient to allow for similar battery life even in this thinner design. Now, it has an all-new display engine that specifically drives this dual-layer OLED display. And yes, it is beefier too, bringing a 50% increase in CPU performance compared to the previous M2 chip in the last iPad Pro.
Yeah, there are a lot of tech specs discussion. There isn't that much I can add to it. It's just that it goes to show that when you actually want to create something truly new, something truly special, it usually comes down to also making like the parts around it a little bit more special, a little bit newer, a little bit more modern. Like a tandem OLED screen doesn't just fall from the sky. You have to create a display controller for it, or wait until there's a display controller for it. You probably would want a chip that is as efficient for that as possible. You probably would want like the proper cooling system for whenever you hit like full screen brightness. So we have seen on like Dave2D's video that like even apparently at 1000 nits it's still like more efficient than the previous mini LED screen. So yeah, it's very, very impressive. Louis, lol, every time I think of a thin iPad of the OG iPad, there was a thick boy. Wonder if anyone will do a comparison. Yeah, like the original iPad was 13 millimeters and something, and then it went down to 8.8 millimeters on the iPad 2, and this is also when it went down from 1.5 pounds to 1.3 pounds. And yeah, you could definitely feel that kind of reduction back in the day. The original iPad was a hefty boy, but they did have a very nice rounded back, which made it like pretty decent to hold still.
It also gets a beefed up GPU with up to 4 times faster performance compared to the M2.
Well, 4 times, no, it's 4 times in rendering. It will definitely not be 4 times faster in gaming.
Then its 16-core neural engine is Apple's biggest ever, and we'll see how.
Well, the previous ones had 16 cores too. I don't know if this means it has like more transistors, but it's definitely fastest neural engine ever.
New AI tasks specifically at WWDC 24, but there are real benefits that I already saw with the ability to go into something like Final Cut Pro, and you can take a person dancing from a background and then have a text title on top of them, but then create a duplicate layer and then choose this option to rotoscope them to put them over the text title now, while removing the background on the top layer, keeping the text, and then keeping the background layer on the bottom. And this isn't happening in minutes or seconds, but instantly, and it's happening on device. That is incredible. Now, the new Logic 2 can take an audio track that's already been mixed together. So think about a finished song, and then it uses this tool or option called the stem splitter that separates the vocals, the drums, the bass, and other sounds as individual tracks that you can manipulate in seconds. It just pulls them out, and the vocals still retain their organic quality.
Instead of looking at the warnings,
Man, I
feel the warmth in ignoring all this fair, no fair.
So this is just...
Man, I always forget how good like the $20 USB-C Apple Buds are. But yeah, I just wanted to like briefly mention this again. Like the improvements to iPadOS and the Pro apps that it has are really piling up. And it's not just like Final Cut and Logic. It's also like you have to consider there are like pro note takers in the world, right? Like I technically would probably want to eventually switch from something like this Notes app to something like Ulysses. And when I think about that, then the iPad comes to mind as a much better note-taking device, right? There, even for video editors, if we go about that, there isn't just Final Cut Pro, there's also LumaFusion, and there's DaVinci Resolve. For photo editors, there's everything from Affinity Photo to obviously Photoshop, and then large parts of the Adobe suite, and there are some CAD 3D applications there. So never let anybody tell you that there are no apps that actually leverage the power. Just ask them, does the iPad have the app you want to leverage its power? And if the person says no, well, then you have to explain to that person that that person has to make a hard choice and either go to a MacBook or like a Windows laptop or whatever, or get like the iPad and accept that that app isn't there, and then probably buy another product, which obviously depends on your own finances and stuff like that. So yeah, there's definitely pro applications, there's definitely pro functionality inside iPadOS. It's just a question, is it enough for everyone? The answer to that is objectively not. Is it enough for you? Well, that depends on you, obviously.
Another example of what it's capable of. And there's so much more that can be done in Logic I didn't show you. Now, with the M4, there is one caveat that you need to be aware of. In order to get the M4 chip with all of that power available, you have to get the 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte storage option.
Yeah, it's expensive. I definitely cannot deny that.
10-core CPU with that's 4 performance cores and 6 efficiency cores, and then 16 gigs of unified memory. You got the 256 and 512 gig storage models that only have an M4 with a 9-core CPU. So that's 3 performance cores and 6 efficiency cores and 8 gigs of unified memory. Now, if you're doing high-end video work or work with 3D graphics, then I'd say obviously go with the 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte options. But I think Apple should have just given the full processor to all models. I don't think it would have hurt anyone. Now, before we jump into what else all that performance can do, I want to at least talk about what is different and what the new iPad Pro loses from the last generation model. Now, this new iPad Pro has an improved 12 megapixel camera sensor on the back. That's with a True Tone flash that is new, but it loses
this will actually
the
be a point where I
megapixel
disagree
camera
with
that
them,
used to be
and
on the M2 iPad Pro. So the new iPad Pro still has 4 speakers for great audio, but this has 4 studio microphones instead of 5, so it loses 1 microphone from the last generation. And those specific choices show that people probably weren't using the iPad Pro for capturing and creating media content that much. I mean, I get it, but to me, I don't think many people really upgraded to the M2 because the M1 and previous iPads.
Louis, you're saying that's one thing I will concede. Windows laptops are becoming hot trash by Microsoft implementing ads in Windows 11. Yeah, and also my question is like, once Windows 12 comes around, and Windows 12 will supposedly be heavily built around AI, I mean, it's fine that like AMD chips and like the Snapdragon X Elite, they will all target like over 40 trillion operations per second on their neural engines. My question with all of that is like, how efficient will all that be if the system that previously didn't actually do that much is now constantly trying to access more processor resources so that it could do pretty useless AI crap in the background? How many users from here on out will now get Windows laptops and then ultimately wonder, well, why is my battery life about 10-15% worse than I expected? Why is my super fast processor maybe not always performing as nicely as I expected, because part of my bandwidth is actually constantly getting, and part of my memory is always getting eaten up by certain AI tasks. And once you consider then stuff like ads, all that shit that runs in the background the second you turn the OS on, like, yeah, you can manage all that, but if you are actually like a low tech knowledge user, now you're sort of effed, right?
Were already good enough. So even if we didn't use it that way, I think it's a bummer to lose them and just to see them take it away. Now, there's also no physical SIM card slot here anywhere. I mean, if you look at every single edge, you will not see one, and that means that this only supports eSIM, right? Apple's efforts to remove.
I think, and yeah, we were talking about compromises. I actually think those are smart compromises. I don't think enough people use the ultra-wide camera. I don't think it was actually like quality enough, in my opinion. I think removing the SIM card in the era where it's so easy to get eSIM is absolutely the smart choice. It also reduces like one extra structurally weak element, further frees up space for the battery, which unlike on the iPhone, right, where on the iPhone Apple still creates iPhone models that have SIM card slots, it's basically just a US specific decision. But since this is a decision worldwide on the iPad, they can actually build their design around every square millimeters that gets freed up. Similar to that, they also removed millimeter wave capabilities. Those were US specific. They're garbage anyway. Nobody builds on millimeter wave anymore. So yeah, I think the compromises Apple made, like removing one of the 5 microphones to leave us with 4 like AI powered microphones that Apple still calls studio quality. To me, I think those compromises absolutely make sense. Louis, as much as I love AI, Microsoft are just farming it for user data. I think AI can be cool and useful. Like just today we have on this channel, feel free to check it out afterwards, we reacted to like OpenAI Spring Update, and I've actually come around to it. I think I was very dismissive of it during the live stream because the presentation was pretty cringe, but ultimately I think the product itself is not bad by any means. The problem with like what Microsoft is trying to do with AI when it comes to Windows, I feel like that there's just like if anybody is here is like a Star Wars fan, right? Like you will pay for your lack of vision, right? This is what the Emperor told to Luke when Luke refused to join him. And I feel like this is what ultimately is happening with Windows, but it's not Microsoft paying for their lack of vision, it's users. We don't know how quickly we'll get Windows 12. We don't know if they will actually improve the actual OS or if all improvements will focus on AI garbage and stuff like that. But they do want to push AI for data mining, for basically their shareholder value, and ultimately like they still have not even fully integrated it into Windows. Like, does it manage your calendars, your notes, your reminders? No, it's still not even like fully a replacement for Cortana. It's basically just Copilot is like built into their Office apps, and basically everywhere where you can pay Microsoft extra, this is where they want you to use AI. but for everything else, they kind of don't care. Cadmac, I don't think I've seen you in the streams. Welcome, brother. I haven't seen much from the reviews on whether the iPad Pro with Magic Keyboard is more stable in the lap when typing like a real laptop. I don't think it would be more stable, but it probably is about equally stable. That's at least what I got from the early impressions from what Mr. Oosterboss said.
All the plastic from the packaging also means that you won't be getting.
And we have more people watching. I just want to remind you, please do all the YouTube jazz, as I call it. Please subscribe, like, share, comment. Of course, the comments are not just for engagement, but they also, as you can see, help me with the live stream. I like responding to your questions. I love having your input there. And of course, if you want to support the channel directly financially, you can leave a super chat or a super sticker right while I'm live, or do as Lewis did, find my Patreon in the description of this channel, support this channel long term. Of course, any kind of support, direct, indirect, just watching, is very much appreciated.
Any stickers anymore, and I'm sorry. And I didn't forget that the front-facing 12 megapixel.
Well, Lewis, of course they make users agree to shit. That's what companies kind of have to do. I'm fine with Microsoft being a little shady. They are a $3 trillion company. Ultimately, they wouldn't have really gotten there otherwise. It's just, I think that there's, like, for example, I've been a notorious defender. People can go back to, like, my old tweets and stuff when it comes to Google, where I have said that I think Google actually delivers relatively good products, and they offer them for free, and the exchange for that is, like, data collection and, to a degree, ads. But that depends a little bit on the specific service. But obviously, all their ads also powered by their data collection. And I have always said, I think that's kind of a fair deal, as long as Google doesn't put ads right at the forefront of Android, of the Android home screen. I'm fine with them, like, being more aggressive on ads on YouTube and in their search engine and collecting your data from Google Maps, as long as they obviously, like, protect your privacy and security at least somewhat. But with Microsoft, I just don't see it. I see basically, like, Microsoft riding the coattails of what OpenAI is doing, and then integrating some of that into Bing and making Bing look a lot more impressive because of that. But fundamentally, like, when it comes to their actual cohesive operating system, I feel like they're doing the very least. Like, I think Apple will be doing the very most to just benefit the core OS. I think Google will be the one most interested in a mix of, like, oh, we need AI for the search engine, oh, we need AI for YouTube, but we also need, like, AI for Android stuff. And then I think Microsoft will be just focused on, like, oh, we want, like, AI to make your premium Office experience even better, stuff like that. Yeah, Facebook is the worst for it, but that's like, but then also Facebook offers now, like, open AI models basically for free in a degree, and they're very high quality, and that's just because Mark Zuckerberg felt like doing that and investing billions of dollars into it. So it really varies with these companies.
Camera, this is an ultra wide camera, is no longer it's no longer here on the top portrait mode, but it has been moved over here to the landscape edge up top here, so that your FaceTime calls are all centered up and look a lot better when you're using it in landscape mode, which most of us are. You're not kind of peeking over to the side anymore. And that also means there's a new magnetic and charging system for Apple's new Apple Pencil Pro, which I have right here. Now, the Apple Pencil Pro levels up what you can do with the same dimensions as the previous Apple Pencil, and you know it's Pro because it literally says it here on the end of it. But it has a new gyroscope,
yeah, the marketing
sensor,
with this device
brings
is
new
on
capabilities.
fleek.
The squeeze gesture, where all I do is just squeeze the pencil itself. This is, brings different writing tools when in something like the Notes app or Freeform, and you can select one of the different brush styles you want to use. You can change the color and opacity right there as well. And in different apps, the squeeze gesture will bring up different options specific to those apps. You have things like...
Yeah, I think the squeeze feature is the one most beneficial to regular users. And I think that from everything that I've seen now, that barrel roll feature is definitely very artist specific.
Procreate, which is very custom to this, or Adobe
You
Fresco.
can still definitely use and leverage it, maybe for like
now with that new barrel roll feature where when you hold in hand, you can
more basic drawing, or maybe like a mind map thing. But yeah, the barrel roll will mostly be like highly beneficial to artists.
With the pencil, you can see me rotating the pencil, and the angle of my brush stroke changes. So I can put down a thin line if I want, then rotate it to put down a thicker line using the same brush. And for digital artists that are calligraphy artists as well, you can use the barrel roll while you're writing to create that variety between thin and thick in a single stroke. Now, Apple says it still has the same.
Now, and this is where I partially want to just to remind people, whenever we believe that a product is basically like perfect, when there's very little or nothing to improve, I honestly think with the squeeze, with the barrel roll powered by a gyroscope, the Apple Pencil also now the Apple Pencil Pro supports Find My. I honestly think that there is a reason why some higher ups at those companies, or even some engineers, hopefully get the big bucks. It's because they think of stuff that we as regular consumers are not supposed to think about, because we don't spend our entire life thinking of how to improve like a single Apple Pencil, right?
Same response time of 9 milliseconds, which is as good as it gets. And you can also pull up the pencil tools, and if you want, right, that's with the squeeze. If you want to undo,
yeah, but also like visually, this should have now the lowest latency ever on an iPad, because I assume the latency of like recognition is still about the same, because it was already like incredibly low, but now you also have like that much faster pixel response time, so the iPad will actually draw whatever is coming in much faster onto the screen.
You can hold the Pencil Pro down on that undo icon, and then a semicircle will appear that lets you undo the previous steps. So each notch you see here is a pen stroke that you made, and as you scroll it back and forth, you'll feel the haptic feedback as you move along it. So that's really cool. Now here's another subtle thing.
Oh yeah, and haptic feedback. I always forget that, because obviously I've never felt this Apple Pencil before. I've never worked with this Apple Pencil before. But yeah, similar to how I love like every kind of haptic feedback on my iPhone and on my PlayStation DualSense controller. Yeah, kind of a no-brainer to bring it here.
I noticed, but when I hover over the iPad Pro in an app like Notes, you're going to see a shadow of the Apple Pencil, but it's a digital creation of a shadow that will match the writing tool you're using. So it could be the pencil or the thicker marker or the eraser. And if you look,
I would
if you
just
can see
say
that digital
like,
shadow, it appears when the Apple Pencil Pro is being brought close enough to the iPad with the hover feature.
Right?
So just some cool features, but
you definitely
this is really
feel that it's an
third-party
Apple
apps
product.
like Procreate, who have aligned with Apple, that take full advantage of all that software and the new hardware features that the iPad Pro has to offer with each new generation. I mean, they've been really working hand in hand with them. You can do real-time animation with the Apple Pencil in Procreate Dream to create a transforming
and
cone.
This is also like it comes down to really like how you actually use Pro Tools and what kind of Pro Tools you use. If you're like an artist who draws, if you're somebody who has grown up now with Procreate because it has supported iPad for such a long time, and now you basically use all your know-how from the regular Procreate, and now you apply it to Procreate Dreams and learn more about animations. Quite honestly, that's not the same experience that you have with like a Mac, unfortunately, because of just the direct
in real
input.
time. Or you can apply a lens blur on a layer of an animated video without waiting for any type of rendering at all, and then playing back the result instantly. Like this stuff, this power combined with this pencil for some of these apps is voodoo magic for digital artists. And if you're the type of person who misplaces your Apple Pencil, well, the new Apple Pencil also has Find My support now. So the new Apple Pencil Pro, this is $129. All right, let's talk Magic Keyboard. And I broke it down in my M4 iPad Pro unboxing video, just comparing the new Magic Keyboard to the old one. You should check it out. But this is thinner and lighter by about 30 grams compared to the previous Magic Keyboard. The aluminum palm rest here. I'm gonna put this down. I'm gonna drop in our iPad Pro.
Yeah, I think it's just so impressive. It's a little bit thinner, it's a little bit lighter, right? But now with the iPad that it's like a lot lighter, suddenly this entire package starts feeling differently. And considering that now you have an actually much more powerful iPad with a much better screen on it, and you have like a keyboard now with a function row, you have a larger trackpad that is haptic feedback, kind of hard to actually like downplay it. This is pretty impressive. Louis, you're saying you wonder what Steve Jobs would think of the Apple Pencil every time they unveil a new Apple Pencil. I hear him in my mind, who wants a stylus? The question though is like, Steve was a very like understanding person of specific workflows, right? He hated having any mandate, any dictate on like user interface stuff, right? He believed that like fingers first, and he eventually wanted even to create something akin to Vision Pro where you hopefully could just interact with Air, right? And he obviously had like a vision for Apple TV. We probably will never see the exact vision he had there, right? And then before that, on the iPod, he had like that digital click wheel. What he was though much more understanding of is like if you have specific needs, right? Now, and for artists, that could be like, well, bro, I love you, Steve, but I cannot draw with my fingers. And then he could sit down with an artist, and an artist could explain to him in 5 minutes why they cannot draw with a pencil, with fingers, the way they would draw with like a stylus. And I think Steve would fundamentally understand, just as Steve understood when like Eddie Q and other Apple executives told them, look, an iPad mini can work because fundamentally the aspect ratio on a small iPad still makes it a much larger screen, and especially in comparison to the iPhones that at that point were 3.5 inches, right? And then of course you have to consider the fact that it now fits even in certain like jackets and stuff like that. It basically makes it a more compact, more usable product, and he agreed to that before his death. This is why I'm trying to tell people, Steve Jobs was not an absolutist. He believed in his opinions and he was very stubborn about them. But when somebody came along, had a cohesive, high quality argument and engaged with him on a high intellectual level, then he was capable of believing that. This is just, I think I've read Steve Jobs' biography, I read Johnny Ive's. Well, I guess it's not a full biography given that he's not dead, but it's technically still is a biography for most of his life, especially for most of his years at Apple. And yeah, you can see that the people who most respected Steve, who most interacted with Steve, also knew that Steve was capable of being talked to, was capable of having his opinion changed. It's actually stupid people who cannot have their opinion changed. This is why I'm always saying that Elon Musk is nowhere near Steve. Elon Musk is probably a decent engineer, and he's a very, very good salesman in the sense that he can attract really, really hardcore fanboys. But then basically in most of his like views, he's incredibly stubborn. He refuses to listen to experts and stuff like social sciences. He like downplays the achievements of even like Kasparov, a famous like chess player, and he brought up like a stupid strategy game that he plays as an alternative. It's like, no, Steve was actually capable of being talked to, having his opinion changed, stuff like that. And I think that the iPad is ultimately Steve's last big vision. And I wish that people understood that part of Apple internally does not want to turn it to a Mac, because they still have people working there who worked with Steve and knew why this vision of just a single magical piece of glass that gives you a very unique, very curated, very polished experience is so special.
But this aluminum palm rest here, it just feels so classy.
Bro, turn off rotation lock.
It feels really nice. The trackpad is significantly larger. It has haptic feedback like a MacBook. Let me change my orientation
Thank you.
The iPad here so we can get, there we go. All right. You have the function row now for quick control.
Now, iOS 18 is supposedly getting a large home screen redesign. I don't know if that will apply to the iPad. I hope it does, because I know a lot of people just want to use, like, you see all that free space, it's at least one extra row of icons and widgets that you can put in. And I know that a lot of people just want to use their iPads to the fullest. And I think that Apple should let them. Even though I am personally very happy with that kind of layout, I don't think that one should be that stubborn and say like, oh, no, you have to change like the entire like how big the text is and everything, right? Basically the default perspective. No, I think that you should be able to have decent home screen customization and make your iPad feel a little bit more like a Mac or whatever. I think that Apple can absolutely do that without losing like the identity of iPad.
And it charges faster when the iPad Pro is connected.
And don't forget, like Louis, when Apple introduced the original iPad, right? While I'm still somewhat fresh in my head, iPad 30-pin keyboard. No, I specifically wrote in 30-pin. Like, what is so difficult to understand about it? 30-pin. I put in 20-pin. I apologize. Yes. Yeah, so this was basically an accessory that Apple had even for like the original iPad for like pages, keynotes, and numbers, and they knew that some people would want to use their iPad with a full-size keyboard and stuff like that, and they just kept on improving upon that, in my opinion. Louis, they might integrate some macOS apps on iPadOS 18. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be specifically iPadOS 18, but I do believe that for now, I think Apple is pretty much held up with a lot of like AI stuff because it's very important for like their for their stock value and everything else. But I do believe that over the next 2 years we will see a lot of pro apps and stuff. George E, yeah, you're late, but it's early, right? For you it's 2:30 a.m. For me it's 1:30 a.m. I actually let you know in my previous video. I responded right under your last comment, and I told you that a live stream would be starting right now. So you should follow me on Twitter if you can do it, because there I share my stream notifications basically as early as possible. I'm doing well. I'm pretty tired, but I do definitely want to finish up at least this video, and we have a couple more people watching. I do want to remind you guys, as always, please do all the YouTube jazz. Please subscribe, please like, please share, please comment. Let me know what you agree with, what you disagree with. It all helps the algorithm. And of course, if you want to support this channel directly, you can send a super chat or a super sticker right in the live stream. That helps out a lot. It motivates me to keep going even when I'm dog tired at 1:30 a.m. Or you can do as Louis did and subscribe to my Patreon. There are different tiers ranging from free to Pro Max, so you can support this channel to your heart's desire in very different ways. Let's continue.
Via power. The hinge here is even smaller. It's just a little more.
Louis, you have 1 hour on me, and I have 1 hour on George. So yeah, we are all very early birds or very late ones, depending on how you want to say.
More like an oval-shaped hinge compared to the
soon it's going to be
circular,
worm catching time
hinge of the previous one. Although this does have the same angle when you open it up all the way.
The only thing I don't like about the Magic Keyboard in a way is this just feels very like unwaterproof, right? It feels like it's just designed to like trap water and dirt in between the iPad and like the aluminum and the keyboard. The Mac just feels like obviously the upper lid very like neatly closes on top and then doesn't let anything in between. This just feels like it would smush everything, like there's zero space in between. But then there's also like the hinge, which is very much exposed with its USB-C port. So I definitely would still worry more about like not the build quality, but just the durability of a Magic Keyboard iPad Pro combo versus like a MacBook Pro.
When I say all the way is when you lean it back. But before angling the stand, it actually opens up to a full
Yeah,
vertical
by the
position.
way, this is Lewis, you've asked before, how do you think this will perform on a lap? Now, obviously, this is on a large, like very, very flat surface, but you can see the fact that it does this very nicely at 90 degrees. This to me gives me a lot of belief that this would be very sturdy and work very nice on a lap as well.
Unlike the previous Magic Keyboard, which is kind of angled forward like this before you actually do the rotation on it. So there's just a little more usability here with this new Magic Keyboard. And when you use this combined with the new iPad Pro, it literally feels like a Mac.
Yeah, so Lewis, again, to your old question about like lappability, basically, I believe this is a term that Rene Ritchie once came up with. It works basically perfectly while you're sitting, and when you're lying down, then it depends definitely a little bit on like how you lie down, at what angle do you position your knees. So if you ever had like an iPad Pro with a Magic Keyboard, you probably would be able to tell me, but I never had, so I cannot give you that kind of data.
MacBook type experience. It's just not running macOS. I mean, you really can't deny that when you look at this, this is exactly how it looks and feels, almost like a MacBook. Like from a distance, someone might think that. Like, Apple, are you telling us that you also are looking at this like a MacBook? Like, I know I'm fishing, I'm just asking. And I think one more thing about this keyboard case is that the iPad is absolutely its thinnest and lightest when it's not in its case at all. I mean, it's a little lighter than the previous generation when combined here with the Magic Keyboard. But then once you have the Magic Keyboard case on it and you close it up, it honestly feels exactly like an M1 or M2 iPad Pro. Even when you
it's also, by the way, pretty much the exact same weight as a MacBook Air. It's a 13-inch MacBook Air. So yeah, take it for what you want. Like, Apple definitely has like a target in mind. It's 1.25 kilograms, I believe, versus 1.24 as a combination. So yeah, definitely like very, very similar experience.
look at this, right? If I put it on its stand and I face it towards you, okay, when it's on its stand, you don't see or feel how thin it is. So there are times where it feels exactly.
Well, yeah, but it depends a little bit still on your use case. I would still say that the fact that it's all thinner by itself, like the Magic Keyboard itself, and then the iPad, it fits better into every bag and stuff like that. The fact that it's a little lighter makes it a little bit more comfortable to carry around. And yeah, when you detach it then from the Magic Keyboard, this is when the magic actually starts. Georgie, you're saying you're trying to figure out if the bezels are thinner on the 11-inch because with my M1, my fat fingers interfere with the screen. You have to explain that to me, bro. What do you mean? Like, oh, you mean like the palm rejection, right? Like on the side, basically it's not good enough because your thick fingers, when you lay them down like that, the bezels are basically not really thinner. Not by much, if they are at all. Like, from everything we see, it's still like about an 87% screen to body aspect ratio, not like 92% or something like that, which Samsung like tried to like be very smug about the Galaxy Tab S Ultra, that it has like thinner bezels and a larger like screen to body ratio.
The same as before.
So it's definitely not going to be worse. Whether it's going to be better, well, who knows? Apple might have like AI improved like palm rejection algorithms or whatever, but they will never be perfect. At some point, one just has to adjust a little bit in how you use your devices.
Now, the Magic Keyboard is $299 for the 11-inch model and then $349 for the 13-inch model. Also, the new Apple Pencil Pro and the new Magic Keyboard, they only work with the new iPad Pro and the new iPad Airs because of the new magnetic and charging system from the relocation of this landscape camera. But I think that they should have done what they could do, at least to maybe make it backwards compatible with the previous Apple Pencil. I mean, if they told us the exact technical reasons why they couldn't.
I mean, they told us actually for the Apple Pencil. This is why I'm saying that there are good reasons, justifiable reasons for the lack of backwards compatibility with the Apple Pencil 2 versus I feel much less so for the Magic Keyboard. And I think that the reason why this Magic Keyboard only works with the new iPad and this iPad only works with the new Magic Keyboard is simply because the hinge is like fully optimized for basically like like a 5.1, 5.3 millimeter gap, and basically the perfectionists in Apple didn't want to have even the slightest like tilting inside the Magic Keyboard, because suddenly the iPad inside is either thicker or thinner than it's supposed to be. George, that's good. Don't want them to go the Samsung route and worship thin bezels ruin the experience. That's good that you feel that way. I also don't think that iPads need like MacBook thin bezels or whatever. It just doesn't make sense for a touchscreen. Louis, you're saying, I'm just glad it's better than my 9th gen iPad. Well, yeah, that definitely will be the case.
What, just because the landscape camera's there? Could we shift the pen over a little bit? Like, maybe it would make me feel better as long as we knew. But the basic USB-C pencil that Apple released...
I also just think I'm fine with restarts. Like, you have to understand, the Apple Pencil 2 is 6 years old. At this point, something new had to come along. The Apple Pencil 1 came out with the 2015 iPad Pro, late 2015. By 2018, that meant that the latest, greatest iPad didn't have any kind of support for it. I mean, you probably could do the stupid shit that like the 10th gen iPad does with the Lightning Apple Pencil, but why would you ever even consider doing that? And I'm absolutely fine with 6 years after the 2018 iPad Pro, which is now double the timeline between the 15 iPad Pro and the 2018 iPad Pro. I'm absolutely fine with needing a restart on accessories. I don't see a problem with that.
At the end of last year, that works with the new iPad Pro hardware that was announced. But the previous Apple Pencil 2, that does not work with the new iPad Pro. And I know this because I tried it, so you can be let down here from me and not in person.
Yeah, but by the way it attaches, you can basically feel that the magnets are definitely repositioned, right? It's not a question of polarity, because you can always attach the iPad in one direction or the other. So Apple is not artificially excluding Apple Pencil 2 support. You just see that because the iPad is a little thinner and because this mechanism has been redesigned, this is why the Apple Pencil 2 doesn't work.
Trying it for yourself, just guessing. So yeah, that's a sad Apple.
Oh, he still does those good, bad, and sad apples.
But most people are still probably going to use this new iPad in the same way that they did before. I mean, let's just be honest, and they can still use their current
it's an iPad,
whatever
right?
model that they have,
not
the same
much
way that they do today.
You would do
and
to
I
change
know for the
that.
longest time, right? The consumer feedback has been to unlock the iPad and give us Mac OS on it. Mac OS to finally open it up. I think now would be the time, because we're gonna have to wait until.
And again, I just think this is a misguided approach. Ask for more pro apps. Ask for more pro features. And again, like Louis, George, we've had those discussions in one of my previous streams. It's definitely not as simple as give us macOS. I've outlined a lot of the issues that would come from that. Louis, Jesus, my last iPad Pro was the 9.7-inch iPad Pro. That was the only 9.7-inch iPad Pro. Right after that, we moved to like the 10-plus-inch iPad Pros. So that was the A9X iPad Pro that launched in early 2016 and had 2 gigabytes of memory versus the 4 gigabytes of memory that the 13-inch iPad Pro had with the same A9X processor. Correct me if I'm wrong on the specs, but I'm pretty sure I'm right. Georgie, have to insert Sat Apple every now and then and criticize iPad OS mindlessly for those juicy views. Yeah, but I think Brian is also like a very fair person in that way. He loves Macs, so I don't think he believes that it would cannibalize any sales. Or that it would infringe on the average user experience, because he is a pro, because he uses both anyway. He has like Big Macs, not the McDonald's kind, and big iPads, right? Anyway, so he does just not fully understand the broader repercussions for like less tech-savvy individuals, for Apple's business overall, things like that, right?
DC to find out, Apple has treated the iPad like a separate device that can do your basic stuff like email, web surfing, and watching videos, and then also do these uniquely great things with a touchscreen, and then digital artists and creatives, especially with the Apple Pencil. They can do so much more than obviously you can do on a Mac. They have given us Final Cut Pro and Logic for higher end production, and then you got high-end 3D creation apps like Uniform and ZBrush that are being used by the creatives at Pixar today. Those are coming to the new iPad Pro as well. So when people say it does not use all its power, I kind of disagree. I would say
And this is why I respect him. We've had that argument, and I believe either Louis, you, or George, you said that, like, yeah, it's actually very smart to say that, like, the power of the iPad gets used. It's just the question is, does it get used in the exact way that certain consumers want? But there are 3D applications that will absolutely max out the GPU. The same goes for certain games. And obviously the screen by itself, you can make it as bright as you want. You can use it in apps like Final Cut, whatever, right? You have 5G. There are so many capabilities that you can max out on the iPad. This idea that it's like constantly underutilized, it's a little weird, because I use my MacBook, like even right now while I'm streaming, watching a video, having Notes app, technically my M1 Max with 32 gigabytes of memory is overpowered for this. Am I weeping over it? No. George, Louis, a lad of pure and exotic culture, still have an iPad 3 lying around which runs settings apps with some juicy 20 FPS. Yeah, over time the experience degrades. If they put macOS on it, they would have to remove one of their MacBooks, and I think they would be fine with cannibalizing MacBook Air sales. I just think that Apple fundamentally believes that an iPad could be the path to a future that feels a little more intuitive, even more versatile than macOS, and this is why I would love for them to have like a pro workflow team similar to the one that ended up creating like the thicker MacBook Pros that we have with more ports and stuff, and just think what features is iPadOS desperately missing that we can really easily bring to it. Stuff like Finder, maybe, even if it's slightly scaled down. Stuff like support for apps like OBS. Again, and you saw that in Dave2D's video, where like I use OBS directly for streaming, but you can use OBS also for just capturing like multi-camera input and stuff like that. You can do a lot. And then you further improve on Final Cut, Logic capabilities. You bring Xcode to the iPad. Maybe you bring down like a scaled down terminal. And then I think step by step, people would feel more and more at ease at getting the iPad. And even now, like browsers, for example, you will soon be able to get like fully Chromium based browsers, at least in the European Union. I forgot if they brought that rule to other regions, right? But like, so if WebKit browsers were ever a bottleneck for your usage, well, now you would have like the proper Mozilla Firefox, the proper Chrome, the proper Microsoft Edge, and that alone will bring a lot of functionality given just how much stuff has been built around the web in recent years.
it does, but it's unleashed specifically for apps and creative use cases that just a very small percentage of people use, and then you have a very vocal percentage of people that don't use them at all. You know, there is...
You said your Luz, you're saying your iPad 3, which I assume you mean by that the new iPad, right? The original iPad with the Retina display. You say that thing lasted for years. My experience with the iPad 3, I didn't have one. I went from the iPad 2 to the iPad Air, but I had a friend who used an iPad 3 for quite a while. My experience for the iPad 3 was that it was actually very much underpowered for its Retina display, and that it very much had issues like maintaining a solid 60 FPS. Georgie, having macOS on a touchscreen will never work, well, unless they really redesign macOS. At that point, what is easier, redesigning macOS from the ground up or bringing more pro features to iPadOS, right? Look at all those laptops that have touchscreens, barely anyone uses them. That's absolutely like Steve Jobs. Was it Steve Jobs? Yeah, I think it was still Steve Jobs who said it. Like that it gives great demo to like scroll on your laptop or whatever, but then your arm wants to fall off. And that has been always my experience whenever I interact with like a touchscreen laptop. After a time, I just am not interested in using that touchscreen anymore. iPads should cater for the majority rather than the vocal minority. And you also have to understand, those iPad Pros, they are for minority of even iPad users, right? iPads already outsell Macs, but the iPads that sell the best are like the iPad 10th gen and to a degree like different versions of the iPad Air, maybe not even all versions that have like Stage Manager, right? So this idea that Apple needs to cater specifically to the capabilities of the iPad Pro instead of just just saying the iPad Pro is a nicer version of all those other iPads, plus some stuff like Stage Manager. Well, granted, that obviously works with M1 and up, but that still excludes like the iPad Mini or the 10th gen iPad. I just think it's asinine, because like people want nicer screens. As stupid as it sounds, some people just want the nicest screens, the best speakers, the best cameras for FaceTime, for YouTube, for Netflix, for reading, for taking notes, stuff like that. They just value that those specific experiences get better. They don't need more experience. Does that make sense to you guys, what I'm saying?
There's no device that can do what the iPad Pro can do when you're talking about Procreate, right? Video editing and 3D apps used on a large touchscreen display. Even I don't use it as my main primary device for video editing, but I can still absolutely edit videos on it, and I have, but I haven't made it my primary device. Now the new Final Cut Pro 2, they have this new cool multicam setup that they teased to us that allows you to use multiple iPhones as cameras in different spots, and then edit the stream by just tapping on Final Cut Pro 2 software, the camera angle that you want during playback, and just creating the seamless like camera 1, camera 2, camera 3.
And by the way, you can also feel like the YouTube bias. The fact that both him and Dave2D mentioned this feature kind of says a lot about the fact that, yeah, like if they were just like note takers, you would know that like they would just not care as much about like multicam Final Cut setups.
Yeah, I thought that was really slick, and that makes it even more useful for someone like me. And that's one of the legit killer apps for creatives that will be coming later this spring. And I'm definitely looking forward to that. Now, I know that it's clear the general public, they want this to also run macOS. Like how many?
No, this is like, this is what happens when you live in tech Twitter world. Like Twitter does not represent the real world. Twitter does not represent the real iPad clientele. This idea that the general public wants it to run macOS is 100% not true. Lewis, I think it would be too niche for Apple to get into. If only cater to the minority, the majority will be annoyed. That's absolutely true. This is when Rene Ritchie was still like a tech reviewer. He would constantly bring that up, that fundamentally Apple has to be beholden to the majority of their users and not a minority. Everything else just doesn't make business sense. And when you had the iPad 3, you only used it for YouTube and Minecraft. Yeah, then it makes sense that it would last ages. Guys, we have a couple of people, extra people joining, which obviously I'm very grateful at this late hour. If you want to support this channel, you can do it just by watching the videos, by subscribing, liking, sharing. As always, let me know in the comments what you disagree with, what you agree with, what you think I can do better. And if you want to support this channel directly, we have a couple people in the chat who are very notorious for being amazing supporters of this channel. Leave a super chat, leave a super sticker. All support is greatly appreciated. It helps me keep this hobby going. It helps me invest more time. It helps me invest more money into tech to improve my output. So, and of course, you can also do as Lewis did today and subscribe to my Patreon and become a long-term supporter of the channel.
Have we said, if only Apple made it like the Surface, but in Apple's way? Like, hey,
George, you are saying some awesome insights, Mark. The issue with iPad Pro being for professionals can be argued against by recognizing normal people want 120 hertz. I'm one of those people. I can confirm I can never go back to 60. Yeah, and I also think that beyond that, like devices like the PlayStation 4 and soon PlayStation 5 Pro exist. AirPods Pro, right, exist. What about this thing is professional? It's a nicer version of AirPods. Like the iPhone Pro is probably the most pro right now out of any iPhone Pro ever, because we now have like the faster USB-C port. It has more cameras and stuff like that. But fundamentally, most people that buy an iPhone Pro focus on the stuff like, oh, it's built out of nicer materials. And again, like George, like you did, it has ProMotion. Like fundamentally, not everybody cares about like 10 gigabyte per second USB-C. Lewis, if you want a touchscreen Mac, you can get some dumb accessory. Yeah, those were the days, man.
Hey, I'd love for that to happen too. I've been begging for that for years. Like I was begging for Final Cut Pro and they finally brought it. But if I'm being honest, you know, I do think I've probably been beaten down a little bit into submission, hoping it still happens with macOS after so many years of nothing. Like, would I want a full desktop Photoshop and full desktop Premiere to run on an iPad? Yes, absolutely.
Well, I would also question Adobe's capability to design applications like that. Their apps really don't like things with 8 gigs of RAM or less. So you would basically be having those apps almost like exclusive to the 16 gigabytes, at least like Premiere. Like Photoshop probably could still be decent, but yeah, like again, now we're not talking just about like what Apple can do for this device, but now we're talking about how good are actually those other developers in utilizing this hardware. George, sleeping, to wake up early, ruin sleep schedule to watch some premium mark content. I appreciate it. George, you're an amazing supporter. You've left some very generous super chats in the past. Now you're giving us a lot of your time, contributing a lot in the comments. Louis, you're doing the same. Thank you so much. Anybody who else is watching, you can also feel free to participate in the comments. I do love having your guys' input. I do like responding to your questions. Obviously, you can leave a super chat, then I will guarantee respond, but I will probably respond even without. Do they not make a 13-inch MacBook of some sort? I don't understand your question, Louis.
Absolutely. Apple already announced that the MacBook Air is the world's best-selling 13-inch laptop and the best-selling 15-inch laptop. So to me, if they already have those two spots locked in from a sales standpoint, have established themselves as leaders, it's not like they're really hurting themselves now to open up the Mac OS and put it on an iPad anymore. I think not having Mac OS does not make the iPad a bad device, like some people really claim. I repeat, it does not make it a bad device, and there's a lot of things it does great that other devices can't do either, but it could do so much more with Mac OS, also running it on it as an option. The hardware is primed to support it. That's not going to be an issue, and I'd like to see that be part of
Oh, Evan Rogers, I haven't seen you in the comments for quite a while. What are the reviews of the Nano Glass? I haven't seen like video reviews of that, but from everything that I've heard from the first impressions and what I've briefly read on like sites like Verge and Engadget, because they posted like written reviews, not video reviews yet. Basically, the universal claim here is that the Nano Glass thus far is not very useful, in the sense that if you are like a regular user, the fact that this now gets to 1000 nits kind of negates probably most people's needs to get like a nano edge texture glass. But if you are like if you're using this as some kind of movie reference device in the field, in the desert, like as I said in one of my previous stream, if you are like Denis Villeneuve and you're like I probably mispronounced it and you're filming like the next Dune, then yeah, maybe you would want to get the nano edge glass. But for regular consumers, probably not. But welcome, Evan. I've missed you in the comments. You've been quite vocal in the past, and yeah, I always appreciate that. Jordan pushing the price. Yeah, obviously there's Samsung were terrible for just checking out products. Yeah, guys, I'm seeing your comments. I would just want to continue this for a little while, and then I do have one last question. If you guys want me to react to the latest Tailosive tech video, or if you have something else you want me to react to, but then it wouldn't be hopefully be too long, right? So if you are like right now in the chat, and if you're right now watching, please, if you know something I should be reacting to, something that is of great interest, again, I will keep on covering stuff. Just today I will still be like reacting to like Google's I/O, and I will be also doing some more breakdowns of like M4 benchmarks, because I have continued like my Twitter debates on this topic and learned a lot more. But yeah, if you have any other video, either any other review, or if you maybe like me and you like what Drew has just published, because I think it might be pretty controversial, where he says, oh, don't buy new iPads. So let me know if you have something like that in mind.
Next evolution of iPad. So, hey, maybe something along those lines happens at WWDC 24. We're just gonna have to wait and see. Now you have the entry-level iPad Pro 11-inch with 256 gigs of storage with Wi-Fi. That starts.
Evan, I don't think that people will ever get rid of their macOS obsession. at least until the very point where Apple brings like 95% of macOS functionality. George, you're recommending I should check out Dave2D's video. Well, bro, I do give you the permission to scroll to the beginning of this video and then guess what I've reacted to today before you join.
So that's $200 more than what the previous 11-inch iPad Pro started at. And I can imagine most of that cost comes from the new Tandem OLED display, you got the new M4 chip, and then a redesign of the body. Then you have the 13-inch iPad Pro with 256 gigs of storage with Wi-Fi. That starts.
I still think that, by the way, that 13-inch iPad would just be such a slam dunk in the lineup at $11.99. Not that I think it's unjustified at $12.99, but like at $11.99, it's just $100 more expensive than the 13-inch MacBook Air with M3. Yeah, that $300 price gap just feels a little bit disproportionately weird.
Starts at $12.99. That's a $300 jump. You got the nano texture coating. That is an additional $100.
George, you're saying my bad. Yeah, I did react to Dave2D before you joined the stream, but you can check it out afterwards if you still feel like it.
Option on the higher storage iPad Pros, and the Wi-Fi and cellular option. That's an additional $200 if you want to do that. But hey, power tip: I just use my iPhone to tether to the iPad, so
it's not the same experience. The problem with tethering your iPhone to 5G is it eats up your iPhone's battery life. You always have to keep them relatively close. Granted, that is not that difficult, but like an iPad that has its own 5G modem, 5G antenna. Also, like iPads, because of their size, tend to outperform iPhones with equivalent 5G modems. Like even my M1 iPad Pro with a much older modem than my iPhone 15 Pro is usually outperforms it, not in raw speeds, but like in connection strength. So yeah, if you ask me, if you can afford it and if you really feel like having it, I think you won't regret getting a 5G iPad Pro.
You can save money that way if your cellular plan supports tethering. Now, also, when I see in the comments that are honestly fueled with a little bit of extra fire screaming at that price, just get a MacBook Air. Well, look, my response is just get what you need based on your budget, and however you decide to configure this thing or whatever thing, right? The iPad Pro gives you options, and you can decide if it makes sense for you, but it's not a Mac. And a Mac isn't an iPad either, so it all comes down to just how you're planning to use these devices.
That's absolutely true. I've said that in several videos in the past.
This is not going to change until Apple decides that it wants to give us and make the ultimate holy grail hybrid device. Like, I've been an iPad guy from the very beginning. I was in attendance at that keynote where Steve Jobs showed it off when before it, critics were poo-pooing the iPad until they actually saw the demos. You know, I've jokingly called this the most intimate Apple product I've ever had.
I remember when people called the iPad not even large, like a large iPhone, but they actually called the iPad a large iPod to downplay what it could do.
Because look, you can use this, hold it in so many ways. You can lean back with it. You can have it on your lap. You can lay down on it, you know, on your stomach using it. It's so versatile, and you know, you're touching the screen.
This is why I also always recommend, if you can have it, get something like this. This is part of the Logitech Combo Touch. This is unfortunately also where we get into issues like the fact that that I had to cut off these parts because it just didn't age well. The plastic started coming apart a little bit. So if Logitech could finally get their S together and put out a fully high quality Combo Touch, and then you could just combine it with the keyboard and for all the rest of the time use it just with the kickstand, I think you would have a nigh perfect accessory. Lewis, you're asking why is he asking for macOS? I think he's genuinely an enthusiast, and he believes that he personally would be very much capable of dealing with double boot and stuff like that. When he makes those arguments, he thinks of pro users like himself and doesn't understand that still probably even the majority of iPad Pro users are actually not that hyper pro. Like my cousin, she has recently been promoted to actually supervising a full kindergarten. I'm very proud of her. Just wanted to mention that. She's always my big sister and she uses an M1 iPad Pro with 1 terabyte of storage, and now she regrets not having gotten 5G, but by no means does she ever regret that this doesn't run Windows or Mac OS or whatever. George, you're saying, imagine turning on your iPad and you're welcome to macOS with a DPI scaling so amazing you need a microscope to see the activity monitor. There are so many different issues, and the fact that macOS just generally doesn't feel that great on like a 4:3 aspect ratio screen, and then Apple would have to also put a lot of newer stuff into macOS, like burn-in mitigation for OLED devices, which right now they will have like another 3 years before they have to put it into macOS. But now they would have to optimize macOS from the ground up with all the drivers, with all the tech inside the iPad. I'm not saying it's impossible, but why would you do that if you already have iPadOS, if you already have plenty of very happy customers?
Which creates this different kind of connection to it.
By the way, guys, I've told you, do you have anything to suggest? Otherwise, I would turn on briefly the Tailosive tech video and then slowly wrap this up so that this doesn't turn into a full 3-hour stream, but probably close to it.
I know people that play games until they literally fall asleep with it on their chest with a case stand. Like, it doesn't get any more intimate than that. And
I once woke up, and that's a little bit of a funny story. I sleep with my iPad next to me on that kickstand, right? But I never actually do this, right? I never have like my iPad over me, because I know if it just drops on my big nose, probably the nose is gone. But somehow in my sleep, because I was dreaming of using my iPad, I actually put my iPad over me in my sleep and then dropped on me. That was a frightening experience, I tell you guys. George, the only compromise would be iPad can display macOS when connected to a Thunderbolt display. Yeah, sure, but again, why do that if you can just do like Stage Manager with more and more pro features like ported from macOS? At that point, if you are not afraid of cannibalization by bringing full-on macOS, why not bring macOS functionality?
People should probably also get some help, but I am with you that the iPad software, it could do more, but honestly, I still enjoy the heck out of it. I love the iPad Pro, and it continues to do more, even if it's sometimes even above what myself and most creators do. It has a specific use, right?
Well, you see, now this is where I agree with you, George, a little bit, though. Like, Lewis as well. Like, he is a little bit dissonant in what he's asking for, right? He just asked for macOS, then he went to like, oh, but it depends on your use case. And now he is saying that actually even iPadOS is sometimes already too functional for what he uses the iPad most of the time for. So it's basically like an all or nothing kind of like cognitive dissonance almost. iPads do hit like a brick, Mark. Be careful, bro. Almost lost half my face. Jesus Christ, man. We're all lost.
Digital artists, this is absolutely the device to get. And the design, this is peak iPad. So I'm upgrading, and I'll also be witnessing.
To make another Star Wars reference, it's like, but this is a very, very obscure one. It's from Andor, when like Saw Gerrera talks with like I always forget the name, like the guy who organizes like the new rebellion, and he's like, they're all lost. It's like cool moment. You're saying the David Stalman review for the M4 iPad Pro would be a good reaction. I'll look into it.
What new software capabilities come along?
Thank you,
with this,
thank you,
what
Lewis.
I call like the new era of the iPad Pro. You know, I'm a hopeful person in that way, and that
he's
might
being
burn
very
me,
counterproductive in
if
his
you can't tell already,
argument.
come on.
Are you mean Brian or
was an M1.
or David?
What is it for you, and what iPad you currently have? That makes a difference as well. How are you going to use this? But hey, put in the comments, because you all know.
He basically is wrapping it up. I think, again, overall good review, but very cognitively dissonant on the macOS issue. Like, I think he could have made better points. That's a little bit of the debate bro in me. But David Stalman? I thought. Am I writing it wrong? David Stalman. Wait, Louis, did you miswrite his name? I'll just M4. Maybe that will help. No, Louis, did you write the wrong name? Because I don't know that reviewer person. Does he have like a channel that like runs under like a different name or whatever? Like if I go to like M4 iPad Pro reviews, I can actually check what even is out right now. So Dave2D, this is like a German outlet, Apfelwelt. Brian Tong, we reacted to that. Noah Herman. Noah Herman does some good stuff. How big is his channel, by the way, at this point? It's 238k, so I don't always fully agree with his takes, but he does like decently high production value. Justin TSE. Yeah, Louis, I cannot... Tyler Stalman? Like, what's the name of the channel? Because I don't know what channel you mean. Like, because... or is that like a written thing? iPad Pro My Thoughts, so that's not a review. Matthew Moynes. Tyler Stalman. Okay. Thank you, Evan. Tyler Stalman. Do you think he already put out his review? Oh, yeah, I like this guy. Yeah. A glimpse into Apple's future. Okay, yeah, I think that's a good idea. Stahlman without the H. I wonder, like, if his roots are similar to mine in that regard. It's all okay. Thank you, guys. Yeah, to me, I would pronounce that Stahlmann because I live in Germany. So I will put it still at 1.25, and I'll watch it at 1080p. Louis, it's not Staleman, you guys. This is now your English bias talking. Like, this is obviously this is either a Jewish or a German name that was like rewritten in English. Believe me, I know a lot about that.
Apple has made some huge updates to the iPad Pro, and I've got two review units in front of me right now. They're both the 13-inch models with basically top-of-the-line specs, so this is sort of the best use case, and one of them has the nano texture display.
Oh, by the way, we can actually go into a lot of detail probably with the nano texture glass, Evan, for your question, because he is like comparing them right side by side. It's actually really nice.
So I want to go through all of the new features, just play with them in real time with you.
Yeah, he does. He's mainly known for camera reviews, yes, but he's very good at what he does.
I have more notes, but I'm getting on a plane tomorrow, so you're just going to hang out with me in real time, and we're going to check out this new hardware. Let's start with what Apple probably considers to be the biggest change, and that's just
Evan,
size,
it's pronounced
Stahlman. It's kind of hard to tell until you've actually picked one up. So I do strongly recommend going to an Apple store to get a sense of it yourself. And I do have one of the older...
Yeah, but like you guys have to understand, with the way those names get changed over time, they start to bear very little resemblance to their original. Like, my original name is derived from Greek, then was changed in the country where I'm from, and then was completely rewritten differently in Latin letters in Germany, and now it's getting pronounced different by Germans because certain letter combinations in German have certain pronunciations. So yeah, names change, guys, over time. People who have never experienced that because their families have always lived in one place, it's hard to sometimes understand that, but yeah,
iPad Pro
stuff changes.
Do a direct side-by-side comparison here. I mean, when you just kind of stare at the differences, like, let me know on YouTube, on your screen, how obvious is the difference?
It's very obvious, by the way. It actually feels more than just a 1mm reduction. It's just whenever I look at these iPads, I always fear that I will find like a dent or whatever. But sometimes you see a little bit of what feels like an imperfection, and it usually comes down to actually just how your eyes actually get fooled when something gets very thin. Yeah, George, it's saying like it's Einstein is pronounced Einstein or whatever. It's like from the original Jewish, it's Einstein. From like Yiddish, and then in German it's Einstein, and then in English you would pronounce the sh as like an sh more. So yeah, it's really not like that simple as some people believe.
Thickness. It's not until you're holding them and then you can definitely feel that weight difference.
Yeah.
I think if you're the kind of person that
So and we've covered that in previous reviews, like the it's very thin, but it's the weight reduction that ultimately is really felt.
found a large iPad to be too heavy, it's not so much lighter that will change that, but it does change the equation of whether you're going to throw it in your backpack or not. Like, it will be comfortable to hold for a little bit longer than before. A change that kind of slid under the radar in the announcement is that the ultra-wide lens has now been removed from the new one. I don't mind this at all. I'd probably buy an iPad even without a camera on it because it's just not what I use it for. But if that was important to you, just be aware. By far, one of the biggest updates is it now has a new display. This is one of the big reasons you might choose an iPad Pro over an iPad Air. And it's now using OLED technology, but even more than that, it's using double OLED, what Apple is calling tandem OLED. So it's basically two displays overlaid inside of there so it can double the brightness. Now, I know the iPad Pro is very expensive. Like, I do think this is a quite pro product because it's the price of a laptop if you start speccing it up. But the thing is, I work in video production and I'm used to spending an insane amount of money on monitors. Like over here, this small HD with a wireless transmitter built
Stuff like that is like, it ranges from like $800 to like $3,000 or something like that, right?
in. This cost about
Oh yeah, this is oh no. Oh yeah, this I always forget that this shit comes like with accessories that are like, those are like accessories that make like the Mac Pro wheels blush. Like, this shit is so overpriced. Yeah, this in a package, this is like this can be like 5, 6, 8 grand. Did I see Apple's response to iPad durability? Yeah, I actually covered that in my live stream yesterday, not the one today, or the one before. I always forget, it's now today. So yesterday's stream and the day before that. The day before yesterday, I had a live stream, and you can actually find the timestamp where I responded to it was posted by Aaron from Mr. Who's the Boss, and he had the clip where like he was talking to John Turnus and I believe to Greg Joswiak, and they were like it wasn't ADQ, and they told them like that the iPad it has the improved cooling, which means it has the graphene pad right over the M4, and the M4 is positioned in the center of the device, right? So the iPad has like two batteries that basically go like this, and then the main chip is in the middle. And usually this would actually create a little bit of a weak spot because the motherboard is thin and everything. But now you have a more substantial cooling system right on top of the chip, and they said that there's like metal on top basically, and it creates like an extra structural element that keeps the iPad more rigid and stiff.
as much as one of these iPads a few years ago. Now it is not as good of a display as what's in the new iPad Pro. So this really is the future of where display tech is going.
Yeah, but you can tune like the colors on the spot and stuff like that. They're perfectly calibrated, those devices, and this is basically what you pay for.
It has better color reproduction, better contrast ratios, and maybe most importantly, better brightness levels. And I don't know how much it's going to translate in the video. Let's turn them all up to 100. And let's just look at the same screen on both
it's
of them.
blown up
Is this
completely.
coming through in video, I mean, it's very clearly brighter on the new iPad Pro. This 1000 nits of brightness doesn't really matter indoors, but when you're outside, it will make a significant difference. It is so helpful being able to see what you're doing when you're in bright sunshine. And that's why a lot of video monitors are so expensive. Let's let a video play for a minute. So if you're the kind of person that uses your iPad primarily as a personal TV, which a lot of people do, it's not a huge creation device for me, even though I do creative production for a living.
Yep.
Usually I'm consuming video on it. And
exactly, and that's also, by the way, very much worth a lot to people. Like, if you are like anybody in the creative industry, you probably own like an $8,000 TV, just so you can have the largest, brightest, best, and whatever, right? You probably have like dedicated speakers that together cost like $2,000, $3,000. You might set yourself up for like a giant like media room with a huge like like projector that costs like $5,000-6,000, maybe $10,000. This idea that people shouldn't be paying a lot of money for an iPad for its nice screen, its great speakers, and its fast processor that makes everything run super smoothly, that's just a very like almost like anti-bourgeois, like proletariat perspective. It's like, oh, how dare you waste your money like that? Well, it's my money to waste.
Who care about the quality? I mean, you can absolutely see the superior image quality coming out of this, especially the colors, maybe even more than the brightness. But the HDR also does pop with the 1600 nits of brightness. That seems to be the new standard that Apple's going for with all their devices. I cannot wait to see the screen brightness trickle down to iPhones, especially. Using an iPhone outside, seeing it more clearly, that's going to be a big deal. Now, speaking of...
No, he's actually incorrect. The iPhone already has actually higher outdoor brightness at 2000 nits on the iPhone 15 Pro. Now, they have the same standard brightness at 1000 nits and the same brightness at HDR brightness at 1600 nits. But yeah, the iPhone technically has in some ways a more advanced panel, but it's only capable of doing those things with a non-tandem OLED, because it's a much smaller screen. OLED suffers disproportionately from the larger screen it is. George, you can understand the price increase for iPad Pro 11 because the screen difference was extensive, but why the iPad Pro 13 has the same price increase even though they used mini LED? Well, the reason for that is quite simple, and the reason for that is psychological. It's users got used to like a $300 price difference, and once they decided that they would give like the 11-inch iPad a $200 price difference, also to keep it like below that psychological barrier of $1,000. To them, the question was, should the 13-inch iPad Pro now be $1,199 or $1,299? And at $1,199, it unironically would have much lower profit margins than the previous generation because it would have a more expensive processor, but it would have a much more expensive screen at now the same price for 256 gigabytes, right? Because previously the iPad Pro was $1099 with 128 gigabytes, and now it would be $1199. So Apple just said, let us scale the prices basically with the same baseline as before. People are now used to paying $300 more for the larger one. And George, I would also say that Apple's current devices are very much optimized to be, I would say, about 10 to 15% more expensive than most people would probably want to pay. And basically, like the Apple Store and like day one sales are designed for enthusiasts. And then 3-4 months later, people would mostly buy through like Amazon or through like their carrier, and then now they will get to benefit from a 10-15% reduction or so. And with the 11-inch iPad, maybe people would wait for like a 10% reduction, and then maybe on the iPad, the 13-inch, maybe they would wait for a 15% reduction, right? And those reductions will come. Don't doubt it. Like all Apple devices get cheaper eventually, and also if you're like a student or if you're in the educational market, you already get a small discount. So Apple basically tries to keep prices as high as possible so that they can eventually lower them and create also some, I would say, almost artificial excitement into the into like the release cycle of the iPad.
Seeing things outside, let's swap out the old iPad Pro for another one of the new ones. So now on the left, we're looking at one of the most expensive models you can buy because this also has the nano texture display. To really see what's going on, we're going to need to add some additional light. So I'm sure by now you know what a reflection looks like on an Apple display. It just looks like a pinpoint of light, and that's what the sun is if you're trying to read outside. So check out the nano texture. It really just soaks that up. It diffuses it, yeah. I can't really make it show up in the same way. It just diffuses that light all across the screen, whereas like it is very much clear.
But you can see that the colors are a little bit duller. The blacks around here just feel a little bit more gray. It's definitely not bad. It's still a very premium experience and definitely outpaces everything that probably was even on the iPad before, like the 2018 iPad Pros, but it just feels inferior to this.
Your single source on the standard glass. I've heard people have discussions about this, like it's not clearly superior to have this because it also does slightly reduce the contrast ratio from some angles. The blacks don't always feel
But I assume if he has like the small reference monitor that would also like work outdoors, he probably would benefit a lot from this.
is rich when you're using the nano texture, but I massively prefer it, especially from my perspective right now. Like check out the reflection of that key light and how it just disappears on the nano texture. This works.
This is why I say nano texture is not bad, but it's heavily dependent on your use case. And Evan, you asked that, like, what do people think of this? He is like the perfect person to tell you that he probably needs /wants benefits from it, but it doesn't mean that that applies to you, right?
Is amazing. I also like the physical texture of it a little bit more. This is a good time to introduce the Apple Pencil
He likes
Pro.
the soft touch. Oh yeah, well, I heard some people say that it feels a little bit more paper-like versus this. But now I also have questions because, like, supposedly nano texture glass is also only supposed to be cleaned by like Apple's a polishing cloth. Like, what happens if you use the Apple Pencil a lot on it? Does it ever like wear off to a degree?
Feeling of the regular glass is, what you're used to. It's very smooth. An Apple Pencil on the new display feels a lot more like paper. Like it's got that slight texture and resistance.
Yeah, it feels softer and more
glass.
resistant.
Now, this isn't the first nano texture display we've seen from Apple. When it was available on the Studio display or XDR display, they were very specific about only cleaning it with the expensive Apple cloth.
By the way, guys, we are now close to 2.5 hours. We are over 2.5 hours of continuous streaming. I just want to remind you, if you're watching this, if you want to support me, subscribe, like, share, comment, and of course, direct support is always appreciated. It just frees up my time. It gives me opportunities to reinvest into the channel. I hate asking for that, but if you just want to leave a small super chat, a small super sticker, if you want to consider subscribing to my Patreon, it all helps out a ton, because ultimately this is what keeps me going. This is what allows me to invest this kind of time. This is my second stream for today. So yeah, if you feel like supporting, if you can do that, it would be very much appreciated.
Because otherwise it'll be damaged. This is an iPad. You need to be able to touch it and, mark it up with a pencil. So I've had people wondering, is it going to hold up? So far, I've actually found it's like taking fingerprints less than...
you actually get like that polishing cloth included.
It does come with a fancy Apple cleaning cloth, which does the job, but I don't think it has to be this special one. From what I can tell, this is just holding up fine. It is a new chemical process, so they're not doing the same thing as on the Studio display. I don't think durability is going to be a big issue.
Yeah, they cannot. From everything we've seen on the Pro Display XDR, like there are legitimate considerations about like durability, not in the sense that it will break apart, but just that if you just took the same chemical process and used the same thing on an iPad Pro that is like used in such different environments than a Pro Display XDR, I just don't think it would be smart from Apple.
Don't apply any chemical cleaners to it. That's a bigger risk than touching it with your finger. I think this is like either a very luxury or a very professional.
Yeah, but fingers also sweat. Fingers also hold dirt and oil. So yeah, don't quite underestimate how chemically active your fingers actually might be.
Version of the build, you have to buy the 1 terabyte model to even have the option to upgrade to nano texture. So it's not for everyone, but it's really nice. I'll just, if you're...
It's for him, yeah. I can definitely feel it.
So much better. That's going to be the primary one I show you from now on because it doesn't reflect my key light. So now that I've paired it, and I'm using
Evan, thank you so much. What a freaking champ coming in here with a $5 super chat telling me if you were buying an iPad Pro, what size and configuration would I get? Well, now I'm kind of beholden to answer that, of course, with such a generous super chat. Thank you so much, Evan. I would be buying 1 terabyte non-nano texture and with 5G, and then I would probably want to go to the store and actually feel just how much lighter the 13-inch is. And if I still want to stay on the 13-inch, just as I have with like my M1 iPad Pro, or would I want to potentially switch to like to like the 11-inch iPad Pro. So I wouldn't be quite sure about that. The cost savings are actually quite nice in that regard. But yeah, this would definitely be something at that point that I would consider, which would be like, sizing down basically a little, especially since my use case for my iPad has changed a little ever since I've got my M1 Max MacBook Pro. So but yeah, 1 terabyte would kind of be a must, because I do want the full performance. I would want 16 gigabytes of memory, simply also to just feel the benefits over my 256 gigabytes iPad Pro with M1 and 8 gigs of RAM. So yeah, but that would be kind of my approach. And as for accessories, I would definitely get the Apple Pencil Pro. I just like the look of having the Apple Pencil always there. And when it comes to accessories, I would either go for the Magic Keyboard, and then it would probably both be space black, both the iPad and the Magic Keyboard, or I would go just as I have done on my M1 iPad Pro, and I would go for the Logitech Combo Touch, but I would really need to know that its durability is better than my current Logitech Combo Touch. I've talked about that with people, which is like, this is where like the plastic started to like protrude, basically, like what you can see right here, like around the port, and it was just so ugly and aggressive, and my mom's cat attacked it whenever I visited, so I ended up cutting off those edges. I know it looks ugly, but I've asked like Logitech if I could get basically just a new backside, right? If I paid them like $100, because I still have like my fully functional keyboard and trackpad base, and they said no. They basically say, oh no, we only sell like full combo touches, never just the back. And then I told them to go F themselves, because I'm not paying them a full 250 euros again just for the back portion, because they originally shipped me a product that was definitely not fully up to par. So guys, you see Evan Rogers doing the deed, supporting the channel directly with a generous $5 super chat. George E supporting this channel by subscribing to the highest Patreon tier, the Pro Max tier. I will have to change quite a couple of things on the channel, so I will have to include like the highest supporters of the Patreon tier, but they will get a shout out at every stream. So yeah, if you feel like supporting in any similar way, feel free, be a legend like those guys.
Let's take a look at the new Apple Pencil Pro. It feels and looks identical, except for the badge on the bottom. You wouldn't necessarily know which one you're using. And I've always loved the feeling of the Apple Pencil, like the way it fidgets.
Same.
It's nicely weighted.
Yeah.
Try out some of these new features.
It's a very cool product.
Like the first thing
it feels good even behind the
ear,
ear, though it gets a little too heavy for
so
that.
Real.
And now with the haptic feedback,
inside here, so that it is giving me instant feedback. Obviously, you can't tell when I'm just holding this.
So even though I'm not a big drawer or even like a pencil note taker, I would still always buy like an iPad Pro with an Apple Pencil.
But I feel like the actual pencil is sinking into my fingers each time I squeeze. And you can see it's bringing up a menu here. And as I hover over top, it's kind of showing me what's going to happen, kind of which tool I'm going to end up selecting. Let's just do a little bit of scribbling. You're not going to get anything nicer out of me today. But the squeeze menu also brings up different undo options, which tick with that same haptic feedback. This is one of those things that, you're going to want to see an actual artist do something with, which I am not. But again, I'm going to have to kind of point you to the Apple Store to feel that feedback, because squeezing it is really interesting. And now I'm in Procreate, which I should spend more time in. This feels so cool.
What's the frame rate on the video? It's 30 FPS, otherwise it would show up as 60. Yeah, so guys, if you see any latency, it's more due to the frame rate and the way the video is captured than from the actual Apple Pencil. If you actually look, like right where the actual Apple Pencil is, the brush is already there. There isn't much latency there.
There's this like, okay, sorry, I'm just getting excited. There's just this like feeling with the brush of like momentum and connection that, I don't know, everybody that's already used Procreate probably knows about. Moving into the Notes app, I can showcase another new feature of the Apple Pencil Pro, and that is the idea of a barrel roll. So let me just make this calligraphy brush a little bit bigger so you can see the preview is rotating with me. So it has a sense of the direction that the pen is facing. So pretend for a second that I knew what I was doing. I could do lines that have like thoughtful strokes going in different directions, and twisting works with it. So other people are going to figure this out much better than me. Let's move on to something I understand better than the Apple Pencil. So Apple has also made an update to the Magic Keyboard. Very similar textures and materials to the previous one, except on the inside. This does feel nicer. It feels closer to an actual
I wonder if the Magic Keyboard on the upper part has any more metal for like cooling, because it would block technically like the new copper like Apple logo. So I wonder if the thermals are anyway impacted through the usage of Magic Keyboard. But then again, it's a floating design, so heat can still dissipate a lot through like some of the bottom portion that is exposed. Basically the entire exposed sides and even like the front through the screen. So yeah, I wouldn't worry too much, but it's just like an interesting, more like scientific consideration.
Look, your iPad Pro is going to mount in the same way, unless you accidentally grab the old iPad Pro and then it doesn't mount at all. The new iPad Pro mounts in using magnets. It aligns itself more.
George, you're saying you was looking forward for another video that I can react. It's by Christopher Lawley. He like iPadOS and his reasonable request for iPads, like improved battery and multiple ports. Yeah, I think
I really feel like I need it to keep using
I'll
iPad
probably like
much.
speed
It's
this
both
up a
easy
little,
to
and then we
which
can
now
briefly
also
look
hinge
into
is in a
this.
slightly better place because of the lighter weight of the iPad. And Apple has also been able to fit a function row, so there's a few more keys on the keyboard now, as well as haptic feedback inside of the trackpad, so it's not bumping and clicking quite as much as the old one used to. Apple has also finally moved the Face ID and cameras to the horizontal layout of the iPad.
So this is basically not a review. This is a first impressions, but it's a very detailed one, very nice one.
But that just means like, well, you're mounted like this, it will always unlock. You won't be covering it with your hand, which used to happen on the previous ones. So now we're at this weird place with pricing, where if you spec up an iPad Pro, get all the accessories, it starts costing as much as a lot of MacBooks, MacBook Pros even. So you really actually need to be putting these features to use, be in a professional situation, or it's just your primary computer. We're still in a place where most people are probably better served by the iPad Air. Think of the Pro as a preview of all the technology that's coming in the future, those better screens. They got the M4 processor first, but I think, again, most people don't need to spec it all the way up. Now, before we finish, we have to talk about the
trickle
M4,
down
which
economics,
is
basically.
so exciting. It's such a big part of this. And I honestly haven't done anything on this that has been able to push it to requiring the new speeds that the M4 provides. A really quick backstory, if you haven't been following, is that M3 MacBooks were announced just recently in the fall, which came pretty early. Like, it was a surprise how fast it came. So this is really fast that we are already at M4. Basically, TSMC, who manufactures the chips for Apple, found a bit of a dead end with the M3, and that doesn't mean that it's a bad chip. They just decided to go in a different direction for the rest of all the future chips, and so that effectively means they wanted to get over to the M4 process as quickly as possible. After seeing the Geekbench results, I can totally see why. This looks like the M4 is going to have some significant performance increases over the M3, so that's eventually going to trickle down to the entire lineup, including iPhones, all the way up to MacBook Pro Maxes. So I'm really excited to see what that does, because in the last generation, we had a huge bump in the GPUs. Now, this
George,
generation, we're seeing it in the CPUs.
I just looked into the Christopher Lawley video on my iPad. It's half an hour long, man. I don't know if I can do this, man. You would have to convince me. You would have to convince me how good it is and stuff like that. And you would probably have to throw me a tasty treat to even attempt this, because I'm getting really tired, man. It's not like I want to extort you guys, but it's getting quite into a long video.
As well as the AI, which it's weird. Apple's saying AI now. They used to never say that. But
Yeah, Apple used to say machine learning, which is a nicer term in my opinion, but they kind of have to now say AI to appease like
also made some big strides forward.
shareholders.
So this M4 chip is the first step in Apple really taking a big swing at AI, but we haven't seen the whole story yet because WWDC is still around the corner, and I think that's going to kind of complete this story arc of like what is going on with these chips and what can they really do. So stay tuned. There's going to be a lot of Apple news coming out soon. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Okay, yeah, so this was a first impression. I don't know, like, has he posted something else today? Yeah, like, no. Louis, you do love some extortion. Well, no, it depends. Like, guys, I stream because I have fun doing it, right? But there comes a time when obviously this becomes a little bit of a transactionary thing, and if I am to completely break my sleep cycle and everything else for it, then it's actually not extortion. It's kind of like free market economics. But I'll just briefly click on the video, and then you guys can decide whether it's worth supporting me to actually keep watching this, or if it's just something that we should reschedule to another time, right? So Christopher Lawley, I'll just like... ...2024, I actually don't know this guy. How many subs does he have?
What's on my iPad.
180,000. Does he have a lot of views per video? 20,000, 38,000, so definitely more than I have per view. I like you too, Lewis. It's basically like any other job, or like for me, like a second job. He seems to like really like have a lot of like understanding of iPad stuff. Definitely looks like quite an interesting resume. He has like even covers for like shortcuts. Well, but that's mostly action buttons, so I guess, yeah, that's a little easier. And he has like iPad stuff, explainers for notes, for multitasking, new features in iPad OS. Yeah, guys, you're getting really emboldened because I respond to every message without super chats. I like do like super detailed responses. I like react to videos and make them 3-4 times the length. And now when I actually ask for something back, now you feel like you want to troll me and think like, oh, how much would we have to give Mark to make him watch like a 24-hour video?
The iPad Pro is my computer. It's a flexible device that fits any situation I need. Its display is crisp enough to edit high-resolution photos. It's powerful enough to handle multiple streams of 4K video. It's a focused device where I can write. It's a computer I can run my business from. It's the device I read books and articles on. It's the portable machine I can play games anywhere from. But this is the new 2024 iPad Pro. It comes with the new M4 chip, OLED display, completely redesigned internals, a keyboard that adds function and feel, plus a new Apple Pencil Pro that brings killer haptics and useful features. And I've been using it all. This video is sponsored by Paperlike. I have here the 13-inch iPad Pro. This one right here is the 2TB with the standard OLED display, and I have a 1TB with the nano textured display as well. This new iPad Pro has been completely redesigned internally, making for the thinnest Apple product Apple has ever made. The 13-inch model is only 5.1 millimeters thick and weighs only 1.28 pounds, while the 11-inch model is only 5.3 millimeters thick and weighs less than a pound. The first thing I noticed when I picked it up was how much lighter it felt. It's really only a quarter of a pound different from the previous generation 12.9-inch iPad Pro.
He doesn't have like a specific portion though, anything about like iPad OS, right? It feels like this is just a very like detailed review, which I definitely would like to look into, but I just don't think it makes a lot of sense right now, because I don't think that I will have too much disagreement with somebody who seems to like and understand iPads so well. Do you understand, guys? It's like, for example, the video I originally wanted to still react to, but I won't because now the time is really running out, is Drew's, where he says like stop buying iPads new, which kind of would mean that you probably cannot get an M4 iPad by his logic. Wait, what does he hold?
Drew, is it true that you are telling people not to buy our new iPad? Well, yeah, Tim, when you just don't change...
That's a silver play button. Look, it's exactly the thickness, and it does have like the black bottom. By the way, guys, this is my silver play button. If I haven't shown you this 20 times in the last few streams, now you have seen it. Let's just react to the skit, and then I'll wave you guys a good night.
Pretty much year over year, and iPadOS is still the main problem. It's just too easy to recommend buying refurbished and cheaper iPads from years prior. But would your mind change if we added macOS to the iPad? Oh my god, yes. Are you actually going to do that? No. But I do need to speak to Craig. Oh, right, because he's, taking over as CEO in a couple months? No, that would be John Turnus, but I still need to have a talk with Craig. It's because you're adding macOS, isn't it? I am not. I don't want to hear you say that again, okay? An iPad is an iPad. Yeah, but that's why you add the function keys with the escape buttons, and now we have button symmetry between the Macs and the iPad and everything. Drew, I am serious. You have to...
Yeah, this is like, if there's only one like morsel that leads us to believe that there might be a chance for macOS on iPads, it is the escape key. This is the one move that still like surprises me.
Stop speaking like that, because I need to go figure out right now if boot camp works on the M4.
Yeah, he was definitely holding up his silver play button. It looks exactly like this, and this is where you basically are supposed to attach them to the wall. That was actually quite cute. Guys, I'm wrapping up now because it is now close to 3 a.m. It's now been a 3-hour stream, basically the longest I have done in months. But it has been worthwhile, and I definitely want to like do more streams. We have Google I/O to look forward to today, basically still, and we'll have probably like more iPad benchmarks and stuff like that, M4 stuff. George, whenever I hear crack, I low-key think of Greg's and their delicious sausage rolls. Yeah, the brain works in mysterious ways, man. So, yeah, it was a funny skit from Drew. I don't think I'll need to, like, actually watch the video. As for the video from, what was his name? From Christopher Lawley, maybe I'll look into that, but probably not this week anymore, because I still do have some other things to cover this week, and we probably might even look into stuff like iPad Air reviews or whatever. They should be coming out at about the same time. So regardless, I just wanted to say a big thank you to anyone who is watching, anyone who is commenting, anyone who subscribed. Obviously, we're now at well over 100,000 subscribers. If you share those videos, that's a big help to make the community grow. If you obviously like follow me on Twitter so you can share with me info and suggest topics, stuff like that. And of course, if you support directly with a super chat, like even Rogers did today, but also George E did in the last couple of streams. So and Lewis, who has left both super chats in the past and today, subscribe to my Patreon at the highest tier. So you all guys are amazing. Just watching is already great. Just leaving a like is already a great. Obviously, some of you go above and beyond, and I just want to say how absolutely grateful I am for that amazing support. Obviously, we can tease each other about like, what do I do for money? What do I do for free? To me, it just matters that you're here. To me, it just matters that like you like enrich my experience learning more about technology. I hope I can give some of that back to you. I hope you appreciate some of my insights, you appreciate some of my more controversial thoughts, some of my more mainstream thoughts, and then we can all debate about it. We can find common ground. This is what I'm here for. I enjoy covering Apple tech. I enjoy covering other tech. I've even covered like some Xbox stuff in one of my recent videos and then it cratered all views. So I appreciate everyone who makes this possible. It's a great hobby. It's a great side kick, what is it called? Side project for me, I guess. So yeah, it's been an amazing ride, and I want to continue riding this roller coaster. Thank you so much for making this happen for me. I will be you guys also post fun stuff in the comments about making Apple great again through porting macOS to iPad, even though it has never been on iPad. So you make me laugh, you make me a better streamer. Thank you so much. I'll look forward to streaming later today when Google I/O is around the corner, and as I said, I'll be taking the weekend off from like Friday to Monday. I do have other plans. I'll try to maybe put out a short or something in the meantime. For other interactions with me, follow me on Twitter. Of course, let me know in the comments what you would like to see me cover next. And just always catch me in the next one. This was Mark Tech tuning out. George, I gave you a 2-hour stream. Others, I gave a 3-hour stream. For me, this was like a 4-hour experience from seeing that the reviews came out to actually like covering them. So yeah, I do have to catch some sleep now, and most of you do as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. See you in the next one. This is Mark Tech, now officially tuning out.